Chapter 462. Only Yun-yi, Qin Yiru, and Xiao Yunju knew Ce. However, Ce walked straight to Yun-jian. It was as if Yun-jian was the only person in his deep eyes. Yes, she replied calmly to Ce. Yun-jian wasn't good at expressing her emotions, but her slightly raised eyebrows proved that she was excited. Ce Gij. Xiao Yunju took the opportunity to run from Yun-jian to Ce. Xiao Yunju was becoming more and more dependent on Ce. Every time he saw Ce, it was as if he had seen a delicious candy. He didn't even want his own sister and directly ran into Ce's arms. He was like a treasure hunter. Yun-jian, Ce, and Xiao Yunju's daily interaction stunned everyone present. They didn't hear wrongly. Zhu Jie was just bragging about the value of this Lamborghini. It definitely wasn't less than 1,000,000 yuan. How could a person who could take out 1,000,000 yuan to buy a car be poor? It had to be known that in 1998, things were cheaper, and the monthly income of ordinary people wasn't high. At that time, if a person's monthly income was more than 1,000 yuan, it was already considered a high income. As for people who could spend 1,000,000 yuan to buy a luxury car, it could be said that there was no such person. Most importantly, the man driving this car was actually so familiar with Yun-jian. Yun-jian, Ce, and Xiao Yunju stood together like a family. Everyone present was stupefied. As for Zhu Jie, who had just spoken rudely to Yun-jian, he was so ashamed that he was speechless. He didn't even dare to appear in front of Yun-jian and the others. Think about how he had just insulted Yun-jian. That tone. To be honest, Zhu Jie had never thought about how successful Yun-jian would be in the future. Even if she was capable, she was just a girl. There were a lot of things that minors were limited in doing. In Zhu Jie's mind, Yun-jian was just a girl. How capable could she be in the future? However, when Zhu Jie ran to Ce to beg, he suddenly realized that Ce actually knew Yun-jian. It was Zhu Jie's first time experiencing something so embarrassing. His expression darkened instantly. However, Zhu Jie didn't say anything else. "Hey, you're here? There's still a stool left. Take a seat and rest." Qin Yiru walked over with a smile as she called out to Ce affectionately. Then, Qin Yiru asked Ce worriedly, "Hey, have you had dinner?" Ce was holding Xiao Yunju's hand. He had rushed all the way back from an Hun group because he had promised Yun-jian to come back and celebrate Chinese New Year with her. He had not rested for even a second on the way back, so of course, he hadn't eaten dinner. Ce's hair fluttered as he shook his head at Qin Yiru. "No. You child. Why didn't you tell me you were coming over? You haven't even learned how to take care of yourself." "Fine, fine. Auntie will make you some noodles. You can't starve on an empty stomach. You'll get stomach problems if you go hungry for too long." Qin Yiru reprimanded Ce like an elder reprimanding a junior before turning to make noodles for Ce. Ce's heart was warmed. The heartwarming scene between Ce, Yun-jian, and the others took on a different meaning in Qin Fenger's eyes as her envy and jealousy intensified. Chapter 463. Qin Fenger simply couldn't stand Yun-jian, so she purposely raised her voice so that her friends and relatives would take a good look at Yun-jian. It would be best if they misunderstood that Yun-jian was Ce's mistress. After all, when Ce drove his Lamborghini, everyone assumed that he was a rich man's son. Other than those rich men who could buy anything they wanted, who else could afford a sports car that cost more than $1 million? In 1998, country Z's economy had just started to take off. It was only in the 21st century that the economy started to pick up and gradually increased. The development of technology amazed everyone. However, one thing was for sure: in 1998, the prices of goods were still very cheap. "Mistress!" Before Yun-jian could say anything, Ce had already raised his eyebrows. His handsome face was as if it had been carefully sculpted, as if it was a perfect masterpiece created by God himself, without the slightest flaw. What? Isn't that the case?" Qin Fenger replied confidently. Then, she suddenly thought of something and immediately said it. "It's New Year's Eve now. Why aren't you at home? Why are you here other than for Yun-jian?" Qin Fenger's words were even more firm. It was as if she had seen the entire scene. Some people even felt that Qin Fenger's words made sense. If Yun-jian and Ce were a couple, shouldn't they have returned to Xinjiang town together? As for the current situation, Ce had driven his Lamborghini to their doorstep. Based on what you said, aren't all the people who come to your house to look for you to keep you as their mistress? Yun Jian used a very clever example to refute Qin Fenger's words. Qin Fenger's words were indeed nonsense, but there were too many loopholes in her words. In the end, Yun Jian managed to turn the tables on her and retaliate. Yun Jian's words instantly caused everyone to burst into laughter. Everyone quickly realized that Qin Fenger's words had no evidence at all. If Ce came here to look for Yun Jian, did that mean that she was his mistress? Didn't that mean that all the people who came to Qin Fenger's house were here to keep her as their mistress? It was because of Qin Fenger's simple and laughable way of thinking that everyone laughed. Ha ha ha, little girl, you're really interesting. Someone laughed and said to Yun Jian. Yun Jian only nodded slightly and smiled. She did not change her smile. When Yun Jian said that, everyone present looked at Qin Fenger as if they were looking at an idiot. Qin Fenger was simply too brainless. How could she say something like that? Qin Fenger was trembling with anger, but she couldn't say anything in response. Qin Fenger was just talking nonsense, but she was forced by Yun Jian to the point that she couldn't say a word. She was angry, but she didn't dare to say anything. There was still Ce standing beside her. Ce was obviously from a big family. No matter how powerful Qin Fenger was, she couldn't afford to offend her. Beep beep. At this moment, a few cars suddenly drove into the courtyard. Chapter 464. Among the cars that drove in, one of them was New Cruise's hottest-selling Volkswagen sedan from Country Z. Following closely behind was a military jeep. The two cars attracted a lot of attention as they drove in. At the same time, the two cars stopped at the courtyard entrance after Ce. What the hell? What's going on today? Why are there so many cars parked here? Someone could not help exclaiming when they saw the scene. Zhang Meihua's courtyard was small and narrow. Accommodating Ce's Lamborghini was already its limit, so the two cars were parked some distance away from the courtyard entrance. The reason why the person exclaimed was because in previous years, there were only a few small cars that could be seen in a small place like Xinjiang town. Today, 3 cars were parked in front of Zhang Meihua's courtyard entrance, completely stunning the crowd. Zhang Zhifan, who got out of the Volkswagen sedan, felt as though he had just made a fortune and returned home. On the other hand, Zhang Zhifan and his brothers were originally from Xinjiang town. However, their home was still in Xinjiang town. Another tall jeep also stopped in front of them. Then, a person got out of the jeep. Yun Jian's eyes flashed. She narrowed them slightly, but there was a beautiful glow in her eyes. New Cruise's CEO. Oh my god, why is New Cruise's CEO here? Zhu Jie did not make a sound for a long time, but when Zhang Zhifan spoke, he pointed at Zhang Zhifan as though he had seen some shocking VIP. Hearing that Zhang Zhifan, who had appeared out of nowhere, was New Cruise's CEO, everyone was shocked. Everyone present looked at him from head to toe. With New Cruise's recent fame and Zhang Zhifan's hard-working management that was not afraid of hardships, New Cruise had become the representative of Country Z. There were even businesses overseas that were interested in collaborating with New Cruise. Therefore, there was no one present who did not know about New Cruise. New Cruise had become the representative of the country's automobile industry. Facing Zhang Zhifan, the CEO of New Cruise, the group of people started to get excited. It was him. This middle-aged man was New Cruise's CEO. This news was simply too shocking. In contrast to the crowd's surprise, Zhang Zhifan did not show any hint of arrogance. Of course, pride was a must. Hello. Qin Li was the first to reach Zhang Zhifan. Wiping the back of his hands, he extended his hand to shake Zhang Zhifan's hand in greeting. Qin Li's tone even carried a hint of inferiority. Hello. Zhang Zhifan did not extend his hand to shake Qin Li's hand, nor did he express anything. Instead, he went to Yun Jian after saying that. Then, Zhang Zhifan's respectful voice rang. Sister Jian. He was already in front of Yun Jian and nodded at Yun Jian in greeting. In spite of it, everyone present was stunned when they heard him. Zhang Zhifan was New Cruise's CEO. This was common knowledge. Logically speaking, someone who Zhang Zhifan addressed as sister must be his immediate superior. It was also rumored that New Cruise's CEO was a young lady. No one knew what she looked like. In spite of it, Zhang Zhifan's greeting and what Yun Jian said earlier. Could it be that Yun Jian was the famous CEO of New Cruise? Qin Li was dumbfounded, so was Zhu Jie. Chapter 465. Yun Jian nodded. Just as everyone was stunned for a few minutes, a person also got out of the jeep that had been following the Volkswagen all the way. It was Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian was dressed in formal casual attire. Without his military uniform, Gu Junjian looked valiant. Another person got out of the Volkswagen. He carried a huge pile of New Year's gifts and walked over with Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian's hands were full as well. He carried a huge bag of expensive Torreya fragrance gifts. It was obvious that Gu Junjian and Zhang Zhifan had come together. Both of them had rushed over on the first day of the new year to pay their New Year's greetings to Yun Jian. The person who got out of the Volkswagen was Brother He, who had represented New Cruise at the dinner party hosted by Zhang Xiaofeng's father not long ago. Brother He and Gu Junjian were walking over together. Both of them were carrying many expensive New Year's gifts. Gu Junjian had gotten to know Zhang Zhifan through Yun Jian. Therefore, they had agreed to come to Xinjiang town to pay their New Year's greetings to Yun Jian. Gu Junjian and Zhang Zhifan were busy people. They would be so busy after the new year that they would not have time to pay their New Year's greetings. Therefore, they had come to Yun Jian's hometown earlier to pay their New Year's greetings. Therefore, Yun Jian did not know that they would come. Gu Junjian and Brother He walked to Zhang Meihua's door and placed the huge pile of gifts by the doorsill. Everyone's eyes were glued to the gifts. They saw that the gifts that Zhang Zhifan and Gu Junjian had brought were all expensive items. For example, the bag of Torreya fragrance in Gu Junjian's hands. Although Torreya fragrance was not the most expensive item, it was rare to see someone bring a huge bag of Torreya fragrance to pay their New Year's greetings in 1998. It was obvious that they were not ordinary people. Sister Jian, there's a lot of work to do in the company after Lunar New Year, so we're here early to wish you a Happy New Year, Zhang Zhifan explained looking at Yun Jian. Yun Jian nodded softly. At the same time, he also understood why Gu Junjian came with Zhang Zhifan. Although Gu Junjian knew where Yun Jian lived, he did not know that Yun Jian was currently in Xinjiang town. Coincidentally, Zhang Zhifan came from Xinjiang town, so he naturally knew where Yun Jian lived. Therefore, the two of them hit it off and came together to give Yun Jian a New Year's greeting. Gu Junjian was the leader of the Advanced Special Forces. His high rank meant that he had to work all year round. Now that he was free, he had delegated his work to his subordinates to spare time to pay Yun Jian a Happy New Year's visit. Yun Jian was glad to see Zhang Zhifan and Gu Junjian. Come in and have a seat. Yun Jian smiled and invited them into the house. Ce stayed by Yun Jian's side and Xiao Yunju's hand was held tightly by Ce. This was obviously Zhang Meihua's house, but it was more like Yun Jian's place to receive important guests. In spite of it, Zhang Meihua did not say a word. This was New Cruise's CEO. Zhang Meihua could not wait to suck up to him. How could she not be happy? After making tea for the group, Zhang Meihua asked for tea eggs to be cooked for them. At that moment, Qin Li, Zhu Jie, and the others were ignored like they were outsiders. Chapter 466. The fearful voice came from Zhang Shun. Who was Zhang Zhifan? Everyone present knew him. He was New Cruise's CEO. However, in comparison, who was Gu Junjian? No one present knew him. However, Zhang Shun's fearful words drew everyone's attention to Gu Junjian. The fact that New Cruise's CEO came personally to wish Yun Jian a Happy New Year was already impressive enough. However, Yun Jian was New Cruise's CEO after all. It was only natural for a subordinate to wish his superior a Happy New Year. Zhang Shun was a junior police officer in Xinjiang town's police station, while Gu Junjian was the nationally renowned captain of the Advanced Special Forces. That meant he was Zhang Shun's superior. Perhaps the people present did not pay attention to the special forces, but Zhang Shun was a part of it himself. Someone as famous as Gu Junjian would naturally have seen his photo before. Therefore, when Zhang Shun saw Gu Junjian's photo, his face turned green with fright. This was the nationally renowned officer Gu. No matter how powerful Yun Jian was, she was only an Advanced Special Forces soldier. Moreover, the Advanced Special Forces soldiers were quite a number. Even if it was the new year, Officer Gu could not possibly wish his subordinates a Happy New Year one by one. What did he ask for? However, as an officer, he had the time to wish Yun Jian a Happy New Year. This was not a joke. In the military, unless one was an extremely outstanding member, it was impossible for one to receive such treatment. A superior officer personally came to their home with gifts to wish them a happy new year. Naturally, the people around them heard Zhang Shun's thoughts. Previously, Zhang Shun had told them about Gu Yunjian's identity as Officer Gu. He was a VIP that even the country's CEO would approach. Country Z's military prodigy. He actually came all the way here to wish Yunjian a happy new year. Naturally, everyone present was well aware of the stakes involved. Especially Qin Li, Qin Huan, Zhu Jia, and the rest who were disdainful of Yunjian. They were completely dumbfounded. If they were already stunned when they heard that Yunjian was a member of the Advanced Special Forces, the shock they felt now was indescribable. However, while everyone was still in shock, Gu Junjian had already nodded at Zhang Shun in a friendly manner. He smiled and said politely, "Hello." This greeting made Zhang Shun's mood surge. Gu Junjian, a military genius and the highest-ranking Special Forces officer in Z country, was actually trying to curry favor with him. Zhang Shun was so excited that he didn't know what to say. At this time, Gu Junjian had already bypassed Zhang Shun's field of vision. He looked directly at Qin Yiru and praised Yunjian. At the same time, he took out a golden octagonal star medal from his pocket and handed it to Yunjian. After verification, when the international god stole the antique jade pendant from Zhe province, your team monarch unanimously agreed that you were the one who led everyone to complete the mission. Therefore, I'm here this time with the approval of the higher-ups to reward you with this medal. The golden octagonal medal was very eye-catching. Gu Junjian placed the medal on the table and pushed it to Yunjian. Yunjian pursed her red lips and accepted it. The antique was stolen by the international god? And Yunjian was the one who recovered it? Oh my god, that's the international god. She actually was capable of that. Qin Li was shocked before he could finish his sentence. Now that the mission was completed, the theft of Country Z's antique from Zhe province was no longer a secret. Instead, it became Yunjian's honor for completing the mission. However, the moment Gu Junjian gave the honor to Yunjian, Qin Li was stunned. Qin Huan was the most horrified. He had wanted to compete in Taekwondo with Yunjian in an attempt to defeat her and show off his prowess. Chapter 467. In contrast to Qin Li and Qin Huan's shock, Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were stunned as well. Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were Yunjian's closest kin, but Yunjian's change was gradual. When did Xiao Jian become so amazing? Qin Yiru and Yun Yi were stupefied on the spot. Qin Yiru was at a loss for words. Her daughter had changed again, but as her mother, she had no idea. Yun Yi, on the other hand, looked at Yunjian in shock and said in disbelief, "Xiao Jian Yu. Yunjian is excellent. She has the talent to be a Special Forces soldier too. I, Gu Junjian, have been in the military for decades and have trained countless young Special Forces candidates, but this is my first time encountering someone as amazing as her. There's no other like her." Gu Junjian interrupted Yun Yi and guffawed, giving the highest compliment he had ever given in his life. She was able to make Officer Gu give such an astounding evaluation. Everyone present could not help shuddering again. Was Yunjian really that good? Looking at the disbelieving gazes of everyone present on Yunjian, Gu Junjian joked, "Why don't you believe me? You guys haven't seen her skills." "TSK. I, Gu Junjian, swear on my honor that even the veteran members of the Advanced Special Forces who have been on missions for decades don't have 1/10 of her ability." This was the difference. Gu Junjian had never lied, nor had he belittled his veteran subordinates by praising Yunjian. It was Yunjian who had the ability. She had the ability to live up to his praise. "Officer Gu, you flatter me," Yunjian said with a smile, lowering her gaze. At this moment, everyone present could no longer describe their shock with words. Of course, that was excluding Ce and Xiao Yunju, who was shaking his head nonchalantly. Since Gu Junjian had said so, Yunjian was naturally capable. Qin Yiru was shocked as well. Both she and Yuni knew that Yunjian was in the Advanced Special Forces and received daily training, sometimes even going out on missions. Every time Yunjian went out on a mission, Qin Yiru would tell her that her life came first and that she must come back safely. Qin Yiru, however, did not expect Xiao Jian's missions to be so difficult. From Gu Yunjian's words, Qin Yiru knew that Xiao Jian's ability had reached such a terrifying level. "Mom, I don't take risks when I go out on missions. I'll only take action when it's completely safe." You don't have to worry about that. Yun Jian looked at Qin Yiru and saw through her worries. Qin Yiru was not proud of Yun Jian but worried that something would happen to her when she went on such a dangerous mission. Hearing Yun Jian's assurance, Qin Yiru's frown eased a little. Don't worry. Every mission I assign is based on their ability. If she doesn't have the ability to complete the mission perfectly, I won't assign her to it. Gu Junjian assured Qin Yiru as well. Qin Yiru looked up and glanced at Gu Yunjian's handsome face before nodding and telling him softly in a pleading tone, Officer Gu, please take care of my Xiao Jian. This was a mother's worry for her child. Gu Junjian nodded. In contrast to Qin Yiru's worry, Ce was not bothered at all. Chapter 468. With Gu Yunjian's assurance, Qin Yiru felt much more at ease. Of course, she was also overjoyed after she calmed down. The joy came from Yun Jian's excellence. She was Yun Jian's mother. Hearing Gu Yunjian's praise, Qin Yiru, as Yun Jian's mother, was naturally proud. At this moment, Qin Li and the others, who had been completely ignored, continued to dejectedly bid their farewells. They didn't have the face to stay here anymore. Zhang Meihua did not ask them to stay as she watched them leave. She was busy entertaining Yun Jian, Gu Junjian, and Zhang Zhifan, so she did not even have the time to send them off. Zhang Meihua was a practical person. She would hook up with whoever was successful. Before Gu Junjian and the rest came, Qin Li, who was a high-ranking official in Zhe province, had undoubtedly become the center of attention. Zhang Meihua, of course, fawned over him. Now that she saw Gu Junjian, Zhang Zhifan, and Yun Jian, who were many times more powerful than Qin Li, she did not even bother to take the time to send them off. After they left behind a pile of tea leaves, egg shells, melon seed shells, peanut shells, and so on that were used to entertain guests during the Lunar New Year. The guests she entertained today were actually the same as the guests she entertained during the Lunar New Year. Qin Yiru and Zhang Meihua cleared everything on the table while Gu Junjian and Zhang Zhifan bid farewell and left. It was already 9 o'clock at night. Time passed quickly as the group chatted away. It would take at least 2 hours to return to Longmen City from Xinjiang town, so it was almost 11 when Gu Junjian and Zhang Zhifan returned. Why don't you all stay for the night? There are enough rooms at home. It was Qin Yiru's first time asking people to stay as the host since she returned to her parents' home. If it had been before, Qin Yiru would not have dared to say so. Zhang Meihua's house was actually the house of Yun Jian's uncle, Qin Liqian. Zhang Meihua and her late husband, Qin Youfu, had left this house behind because daughters were all going to get married when they grew up and they only had one son. It was reasonable that this house became Qin Liqian's property. A married daughter was like spilled water. Since Qin Yiru was married, there was no reason for her to return to her parents' home. Actually, even if Qin Yiru came back, she would incur his sister-in-law's displeasure. Qin Liqian was a married man now. Even if Zhang Meihua was still around, Qin Yiru could still stay with her parents for a while after the divorce. However, if Zhang Meihua was gone too, it would be awkward even if Qin Yiru wanted to come back in the future. This was the reality of rural people. Therefore it was important for a girl to choose a good husband when she got married. Having an elder brother in her parents' home meant that it was impossible for her to return to her parents' home for a long period of time after the divorce. Qin Yiru had been forced to put up with Yun Gang's gambling addiction back then because she did not know where to go after the divorce. However, it was when Yun Gang's affair was exposed and her daughter and son strongly supported her divorce that Qin Yiru mustered her courage to cut ties with Yun Gang. I still have things to deal with at the company, so I won't stay. Zhang Zhifan smiled apologetically at Qin Yiru's request to stay. Chapter 469. The joy that Gu Junjian displayed was the thrill of having a duel between experts. Honestly speaking, Gu Junjian had had this thought for a long time. It was not that he wanted to defeat Yun Jian, but he liked the thrill of dueling with an expert. It had been a long time since Gu Junjian met a decent opponent, and it had been a long time since he wanted to challenge someone one-on-one like he did today. Gu Yunjian's challenge was completely different from Qin Huan's. Qin Huan wanted to challenge Yun Jian purely because he wanted to put on airs in front of everyone. Gu Junjian, on the other hand, wanted to duel with Yun Jian because of Yun Jian's ability. To Gu Junjian, only a duel between two experts was the true meaning. The biggest difference between Gu Junjian and Qin Huan was that Gu Junjian would not find an excuse or feel indignant even if he lost. Sister Jian, I'll be leaving with old Hay then, Zhang Jifan told Yun Jian with a smile. Yun Jian nodded at Zhang Jifan and watched as Zhang Jifan and old Hay reversed their car and left. It was only then that Yun Jian turned to look at Gu Junjian with a glint in her eyes. I accept. Gu Junjian was considered an expert, and Yun Jian would never underestimate an invitation from an expert. Jie, what's a duel? Xiao Zhu wants a lollipop now. Right after Yun Jian said that, Xiao Yunju, who stood beside Ce, tugged at Yun Jian's sleeve and looked at Yun Jian pitifully. Take Xiao Zhu to the shop to buy lollipops. Ce shoved Xiao Yunju's hand into Yun Jian's right in front of Gu Junjian and the others and even grabbed Yun Jian's hand. Yun Jian was about to say that she had just accepted Gu Junjian's challenge and wanted to duel with him. As if he knew what she was thinking, Ce turned his exquisite side profile to face Gu Junjian. There was an unusual golden glow between his sharp brows as he glanced at Gu Junjian and said, I'll duel with you on her behalf. Ce was not asking for Yun Jian or Gu Junjian's opinion when he said that. He was only announcing the fact that he was going to duel with Gu Junjian in place of Yun Jian. Gu Junjian was stunned for a few seconds when he saw Ce suddenly stand up and say that he was going to duel with him on Yun Jian's behalf. Gu Junjian already had some understanding of Yun Jian's strength. However, Gu Junjian was unable to guess the bottom line of Yun Jian's strength. Therefore, Gu Junjian had another intention when he proposed to duel with Yun Jian. He wanted to test Yun Jian's strength. He wanted to test how strong Yun Jian was. Unexpectedly, Ce, who had been standing behind Yun Jian and holding Xiao Yunju's hand, said that he wanted to duel with him on Yun Jian's behalf. More importantly, Gu Junjian saw an unusual glint in this 19-year-old man's eyes. Gu Junjian did not dare to recklessly guess Ce's identity. Ce did not give Gu Junjian any chance to reject him either. All right, I'll take Xiao Zhu to buy some lollipops. Yun Jian did not see the golden glint in Ce's eyes. When Xiao Yunju held her hand and looked at her with pitiful eyes, Yun Jian pulled Xiao Yunju's hand and walked towards a shop near Xinjiang town. Before they left, they did not forget to bid farewell to Ce and Gu Junjian. Qin Yiru was not downstairs at the moment, so she did not see this. Since Gu Junjian and Ce were still there, she and Zhang Meihua went to tidy up the empty bed. Chapter 470. In other words, only Ce, Gu Junjian, and Yun Yi were left in front of the courtyard. As for Qin Fenger, she had been sent back to her room by Zhang Meihua after she spoke rudely to Yun Jian. Qin Fenger was not afraid of anyone but her grandmother, Zhang Meihua. Therefore, she ran away in a huff when Zhang Meihua spoke. In fact, if not for that, Qin Fenger, who had been courting death, would have been in trouble. Yun Jian might have just let it go. As long as Qin Fenger did not cross the line, she would not have done anything to her. However, Ce was still around. Anyone who dared to humiliate Ce's woman would end up in a terrible state. It was just like Lu Xiuxiu who wanted to frame Yun Jian back then. Lu Xiuxiu had schemed to humiliate Yun Jian by taking a video of Yun Jian with other men to humiliate her. In the end, she had been sold into a brothel by Ce's men. Ce was not a good person. He would kill anyone who dared to bully his woman, even if they were women. A gentleman did not hit a woman. That was a lie made up by useless people. If he could stand by and do nothing when his woman was being bullied, then he would not be Ce. He would be called a coward. Yun Jian was not there for what happened after that. She was already holding Xiao Yunju's hand and walking towards the small shop in Xinjiang town. The small shops in Xinjiang town were usually open until 10 p.m. That was because the townspeople usually went to bed after 8 o'clock. The shop had been open for a long time to be able to stay open until 10 p.m. However, today was an exception because it was New Year's Eve. Other than young children, everyone would stay up until the new year. This was especially true for children after the age of 7 or 9. They were the most interested in staying up until the new year and asking for red packets. At 12 p.m. on New Year's Eve, firecrackers were a trend in the townspeople. Before 12 o'clock in the evening, many people came to the store to buy firecrackers and candles. Therefore, small shops that knew a little about business would stay open on New Year's Eve until 12 o'clock before closing. These things and common sense were things that Yun Jian had never heard or experienced in her previous life. Yun Jian, who wandered around the edge of the world and was always on guard against the people around her, would be killed if she was not careful. She had never lived the comfortable life of a normal girl. Therefore, Yunjian cherished everything she had now. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and went to a small shop not far away. This was the shop where Yunjian had called Tiger Leopard from the Kosha mercenaries when she had just been reborn. The owner of this shop was an old man. Yunjian had been to this shop when she had just been reborn. At that time, the shop owner had casually asked her, "What do you want to buy?" Today, Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and stepped into the shop again. The shop owner glanced over and recognized Yunjian immediately. He even shouted in surprise, "Hey, aren't you the little girl who called my shop a few months ago?" Yunjian blinked. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked into the shop. She asked curiously, "You know me?" Chapter 471. Yunjian smiled awkwardly when she heard the store owner's exaggerated words. So this was how he remembered her. "Oh, by the way, young lady, are you here to make a phone call again?" The shop owner sat down and asked Yunjian after he recovered from his agitated state just now. "No." Yunjian shook her head and led Xiao Yunju into the store. Then, she turned to the store owner and grinned. "I'm buying snacks with my brother today." She wasn't doing strange things. When Yunjian was reborn, she was always at the top of the world, so Yunjian was unfamiliar with the world. She always did things her own way in her previous life, so she followed her own personality when she was reborn. However, after living here for a while, Yunjian realized that it wasn't advisable to do that. "Oh, okay. Pick whatever you want." The store owner laughed heartily and nodded. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked around the store. Someone came to buy fireworks outside, so the store owner went out to take care of it. Midnight on New Year's Eve was the time when the fireworks were the loudest. However, it was only 9 o'clock, which meant that it was the time when the fireworks were the quietest. Every year on New Year's Eve, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock were the quietest times. Just like the darkness before dawn, the quieter it was now, the noisier the fireworks would be when it was 12 o'clock. Yunjian let Xiao Yunju pick a big bag of snacks, Lay's potato chips, bubblegum, lollipops. Xiao Yunju picked a few lollipops alone. Xiao Yunju picked as he muttered, "Strawberries for brother Ce, blueberries for sister, lychees for Yun-e." Her small hand picked through the pile of lollipops stuck in the box. Yunjian wasn't a patient person, but she was very patient with Xiao Yunju. In the end, Yunjian patiently accompanied Xiao Yunju to pick out his favorite snacks. After paying, they walked to Zhang Meihua's house. Although it wasn't far from Zhang Meihua's house, they still had to cross a few streets. At this time, every house was brightly lit, so there was no need to walk in the dark. Bang! Pa! At this moment in the silence there were fireworks. At this time, there would also be people setting off fireworks, but it was a minority. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked around an aisle. Coincidentally, a family in this aisle was setting off fireworks. It was not yet 12 o'clock. Most of the fireworks at this time were to worship the gods and pray for blessings in the coming year. Most of the villagers were superstitious while the people of Longmen City were used to worshipping the gods with animals like pigs' heads, chickens, and ducks. At the same time, they would also burn some Buddhist scriptures during the worship. These were the customs passed down from the older generation. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked along the edge. When the fireworks were over, just as Yunjian and Xiao Yunju were about to cross the aisle, a group of mischievous children ran out with matches, lighters, and small firecrackers. "Look, there's a bad guy walking past us. Quick, blow them up. Blow them up." One of the children who looked arrogant and domineering pointed at Yunjian and Xiao Yunju. A boy with a crew cut grabbed a bunch of small firecrackers and lit them as fast as he could, throwing them at Yunjian and Xiao Yunju. Chapter 472. Yunjian's eyes lit up when she came out to buy some snacks and encountered such a situation. "Sister!" Xiao Yunju panicked. He grabbed Yunjian's sleeve in fear and his small and stubborn body stood in front of Yunjian, wanting to block the pile of small firecrackers for Yunjian. Xiao Yunju was still young, but people were sensitive to danger. It was especially so for Yunju, whose experience in his past life had sharpened his sense of danger. When danger came, Xiao Yunju's first reaction was to block it for Yunjian. "Xiao Zhu, come here." Yunjian shouted softly. She took Xiao Yunju and pulled Xiao Yunju to the side while she dodged to the side. Her quick and efficient movements made the parents of the naughty children, who were anxiously watching the situation from afar, shocked. She had made a turn to the side to avoid the attack, her speed unbelievably fast. After all, this group of naughty children had just lit the small firecrackers and thrown them at her, but Yunjian easily dodged and took Xiao Yunju to avoid the big pile of small firecrackers. Wow, that's amazing! At this moment, even the little boy with the crew cut who had just lit the small firecrackers and threw them at Yunjian and Xiao Yunju opened his mouth wide in surprise. He looked as if he had seen something amazing and looked straight at Yunjian. However, before the little boy with the crew cut could finish his sentence, he was slapped on the head by his parent. How did I teach you? I bought you small firecrackers and you learned to do bad things? The little boy with the crew cut's mother hit him a few times and then took away all the small firecrackers in his hands. No more playing. Hurry up and apologize to big sister. The crew cut boy's mother took away the pile of small firecrackers and rushed the group of people to Yunjian to apologize. The naughty children were restrained by their parents and they all apologized unwillingly. Yunjian only glanced at them and did not say whether she accepted the apology or not. She pulled Xiao Yunju away. The naughty children's mother did not say much. By the time Yunjian brought Xiao Yunju back to Zhang Meihua's house, a small square folding table was already set up outside Zhang Meihua's house. There were 2 people sitting on the left and right sides of the table, and 1 person standing next to the table. The people sitting on the left and right were naturally Gu Junjian and Ce. The one standing was Yun Yi. She did not know if their practice session had ended, but she saw that Gu Junjian was excitedly sitting opposite Ce to sit on the bench and play chess. The practice session between the 2 of them was probably over. Yunjian held Xiao Yunju's hand and walked over. She saw that Gu Junjian was looking at Ce excitedly and respectfully as they played chess. You're back. Ce tilted his head and asked Xiao Yunju. At the same time, he looked up at Yunjian. Because Ce was sitting on a stool, he could only look up at her. Yes. Yunjian nodded slightly. Ce smirked, his lips curving into a faint smile that was refreshing and comforting just by looking at it. Brother Ce, someone used small firecrackers to bomb me and my sister. Xiao Yunju pouted as he felt wronged. This could be seen from Xiao Yunju's expression. He was very unhappy. Yes. Ce withdrew his thoughts from the chessboard. He turned his head and sized up Xiao Yunju and Yunjian. He only relaxed when he saw that they were fine. Gu Junjian could not help but secretly laugh when he saw this. If he guessed correctly, Ce did not want Yunjian to play with him because he was afraid that he would come into contact with Yunjian. Chapter 473. Xiao Yunju liked Brother Ce because Brother Ce would help him. He would buy him candy and toys to play with. Children were lively by nature and would rely on whoever treated them well. Xiao Yunju pouted and told him everything that had happened. Xiao Yunju sounded like he was about to cry after being bullied. When Ce heard that someone had used firecrackers to bomb Xiao Yunju and Yunjian, his long fingers, which had been playing chess, stopped moving. He retracted his hand and stood up from the stool. He strode over to Xiao Yunju with his long legs. He looked up and lowered his eyes to look at Xiao Yunju. There was a glint of anger in his eyes. Who bombed you? Ce asked after a few seconds of silence. Coincidentally, Gu Junjian saw Ce suddenly stop playing chess with him. He picked up a cup of tea out of boredom and blew on it twice to drink some tea. However, when he heard Ce's words, he nearly choked on the tea in his throat. Once Gu Junjian was reminded of Ce's terrifying skills and his wife-protecting demeanor, as well as what he had said just now, the atmosphere in the room was strangely subtler. He felt that his words did not match Ce's frightening skills. I'm not injured. It's just a prank by a bunch of naughty kids. When Yunjian heard Ce's words, she guessed that if she didn't explain herself, he would bring Xiao Yunju over to those naughty kids' houses. Ce was indeed that kind of person. He was extremely protective and his personality was just like hers. However, it was New Year's Eve and the whole family was happily staying up for the new year. If Ce really went over to their houses, Qin Yiru and the others would probably be shocked and the matter would blow up. It was a good new year, so they naturally had to be happy. As expected, when Ce heard Yunjian's words, he immediately retracted his vicious gaze. Young man, come on. Let's continue playing chess. With Yunjian's skills, you don't have to worry about her. Haha. Gu Junjian extended his hand to greet Ce with a hint of mockery in his voice. Ce and Yunjian were really a good match. Tesese. Both of them were terrifyingly skilled. It looked like his old bones couldn't take it anymore. Ce reached out his hand to rub Xiao Yunju's short hair. He took a deep look at Yunjian before he sat down in front of Gu Junjian with a smile on his face. The two continued to play chess. The New Year's Eve was long, but it wasn't lonely. Xiao Yunju pulled Yunjian to sit beside Ce and watched as Ce played chess. His little hand was still holding onto Lay's potato chips as he munched on them. Midway through the game, Xiao Yunju even put the potato chips in front of Yunjian and said to her, "Sister, you eat." Yunjian nodded happily. Xiao Yunju also gave Gu Junjian and Yun-yi his favorite potato chips before passing them to Ce. "Brother Ce, you eat. I'm playing chess. Xiao Zhu, feed me." Ce revealed a devilish smile. One of his hands was empty, but he didn't reach out to take the potato chips himself. Yunjian was sitting beside Ce while Xiao Yunju's little hands were barely hanging onto the folding table beside Yunjian. "Then sister will feed brother Ce." Xiao Yunju couldn't reach Ce's side. His little hand could only reach in front of Yunjian. He reached out but couldn't reach Ce, so he said to Yunjian. Gu Junjian, who was sitting opposite him, was speechless. Yun-yi, who was standing at the side, was speechless. Yunjian's mouth twitched. Xiao Yunju still didn't know what was going on and stretched out his hand again. "Sister, hurry up. Xiao Zhu's hand is sore from holding the potato chips." When Yunjian heard that Xiao Yunju's hand was sore, she immediately picked up a potato chip and fed it to Ce. Chapter 474. He dared to be so impudent in front of Gu Junjian and her brother, Yun-yi. Warmth flowed through Yunjian's heart, but it was tinged with a tinge of annoyance. Ce smiled faintly when he saw her reaction. His handsome face revealed a sinister smile. Yun-yi, who was standing by the side, also smiled sinisterly. This was his brother-in-law, whom he had personally tested. If Yunjian heard what Yun-yi was thinking, she would definitely hiss. "It's delicious." She heard Ce's comment out of the blue before his lips curled. His flawlessly handsome face arched a brow as he uttered, "I want more." Yunjian was speechless. Why didn't she realize that he loved eating potato chips so much? At this moment, Xiao Yunju had already placed the bag of potato chips in front of Yunjian. Sister gave it to him. Brother Ce said that he wants more. Yunjian quietly took out the bag of potato chips and placed it next to Ce's lips again. Strangely, the person who ate the most potato chips was Ce. When there were only a few mouthfuls left, Xiao Yunju hugged the bag of potato chips and refused to give it to Ce. He even pouted and said, "Brother Ce, you're bad. You eat the most. Sister bought this for Xiao Zhu. You're not allowed to snatch it away." As he spoke, Xiao Yunju pouted and refused to let go of the bag of potato chips. "After you finish this bag, I'll buy you 100 more." Ce made a chess move. While Gu Junjian was thinking about the next move, he stretched out his arm and flicked Xiao Yunju's forehead with his slender fingers. Xiao Yunju's eyes immediately lit up. He asked happily, "Really? Brother Ce, will you buy it for Xiao Zhu later?" "I'll go after this game." Ce lowered his eyes and smiled. "Yeah. Sister will feed these to Ce Gidge. Xiao Zhu will go buy more later." Xiao Yunju was quickly bought over. He handed the bag of chips to Yunjian and clapped his hands excitedly. Yunjian looked at the remaining bag of chips and suddenly had the urge to facepalm and sigh. After a while, the game ended. Ce defeated the last general on Gu Yunjian's side with the chess piece in his hand and won the game. "Young man, no matter what, I'm still your elder. No matter what, you have to give in to me." Gu Junjian shouted in distress. "Thanks for letting me win." Ce stood up. His hair was fluttering in the evening breeze. He pursed his lips and his handsome face was asking for a beating. "I'm not playing anymore." Gu Junjian spread out his hands and shouted. Ce also had the same thought. He smiled slightly and walked over to Xiao Yunju's hand and pulled him toward the store. When they left, Xiao Yunju was holding Yunjian's hand. Thus, Ce dragged Yunjian to the store through Xiao Yunju. I'm old. I'm useless. Gu Junjian smiled awkwardly and stood up. Yunyi also smiled and nodded at Gu Junjian. Coincidentally, Qin Yiru had already made the bed and came downstairs. Mom, I'll go upstairs first. When Yunyi saw Qin Yiru coming down, there was no one left to entertain Gu Junjian. He said and went to his room. Oh, okay. Qin Yiru nodded. Thus, only Gu Junjian and Qin Yiru were left downstairs. Chapter 475. I won't compromise. I won't compromise. Haha. Gu Junjian laughed heartily as he was quite frank about it. Gu Junjian didn't want Qin Yiru to think that he was trying to appease her, so he sighed and said, Don't think that I'm so noble. I'm just like those of us from the Special Forces. What kind of place haven't we slept in? How could there be a big bed when we're out in the wild? It's like using the sky as your room and the ground as your bed. Hee hee, I'm used to it. Gu Junjian wasn't trying to get Qin Yiru to sympathize with him, but he was trying to convey that he wasn't a spoiled person. He wouldn't dislike this place just because the living conditions were bad. Officer Gu, you're also someone with a story. Qin Yiru smiled, but her expression wasn't as stiff as before. Gu Junjian was easy to get along with, so Qin Yiru didn't feel pressured. Aye, that's right. Who doesn't have a story when they're at our age? Gu Junjian's smile weakened a little. He seemed to have recalled some sad memories. That's right. Qin Yiru rubbed the back of her hands. Standing in the courtyard, the cold wind outside still made her shiver. Officer Gu, let's go inside quickly. It's windy outside. Look, I didn't treat you well. I forgot that you were playing chess in the courtyard. The wind is so cold. Let's go inside quickly. Qin Yiru suddenly remembered that Gu Junjian and Ce had moved stools and folding tables outside to play chess. It wasn't that cold outside, and there were lights outside Zhang Meihua's house. Gu Junjian was playing chess just now, so he forgot that he was still in the courtyard. However, after Qin Yiru reminded him, he immediately felt a little cold. He nodded and said, Aye, that's good. Haha, I was playing chess so well that I forgot that I'm already numb from the cold. I'm getting old. Haha. As he spoke, Gu Junjian helped Qin Yiru put away the folding table, low stool, and other things into the house. Gu Junjian was an upright person. When Qin Yiru packed up her things and wanted to move the folding table and other clumsy things back into the house, he rushed to help her. Qin Yiru immediately had a good impression of Gu Junjian. Moreover, it was still early, so Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju to shop at the store. After Zhang Meihua finished packing, she went to Xinjiang Town's town hall for a square dance. In this era, square dancing had already begun to sprout. As for Qin Liqian and his family, they were already nestled in their beds. They did not stay up for the new year as sleeping late was not good for their health. Furthermore, they cared about their health, so they went to bed early. Coincidentally, there was no one around and they had nothing to do. Seeing that Ce, Yunjian, and Xiao Yunju were not around, and Yunyi had also returned to her room, Qin Yiru simply moved a stool over and started chatting with Gu Junjian in the house. They talked about their lives, their past, and their experiences. Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian were people who had spent half their lives, so naturally, they had experienced many things. They would not have known if they did not ask, but after asking, they found out that Gu Junjian had already divorced his ex-wife. The reason was that he was in the military and could not stay at home all year round to accompany his wife and son. His wife could not stand it and ran away with another man. There was only one son left in the family. However, his son was currently studying abroad and would not return home for the new year. Therefore, even if it was the eve of the new year, when he reunited with his family, Gu Junjian felt that it did not matter whether he went home or not. Because if he went home, he would be the only one in the large and empty villa. Chapter 476. After listening to Gu Yunjian's experience, Qin Yiru could also feel a trace of sadness from Gu Yunjian's words. Officer Gu must have loved your wife very much back then, right? Qin Yiru asked. She was already in her 40s and had already given birth to 2 children. However, for some reason, she was interested in Gu Yunjian's affairs. Gu Junjian seemed to have no one to vent his frustrations on all these years. Now that he met Qin Yiru, it was as if he finally had a place to vent his frustrations. He nodded and then shook his head. At that time I just thought that she was pretty. I don't know if I loved her or not. In any case, this marriage was arranged by my parents when they were still alive. Later on, she suddenly said that she wanted to divorce me, so I immediately agreed. Actually, I still have some feelings for her. After all, we have been together for so many years. Qin Yiru also understood after hearing Gu Yunjian's explanation. She reckoned that Gu Yunjian's marriage was the kind of marriage where the two families were well matched in terms of social status. The rich and powerful families of the upper class were particular about matching in terms of social status. Moreover, marriage matching would also involve the interests of both families. Gu Yunjian's behavior was just like that of someone from a rich and powerful family. Actually, I'm also a little similar to you. Qin Yiru also shook her head and smiled. The night was long, but the two hearts that had been without love in their early years and had been alone and bumpy along the way gradually formed a line of intersection on two parallel lines that would never intersect. It was just that no one had noticed it yet. Going back to when Ce was dragging Yunju and Yunjian to the shop just now, Yunjian's expression changed drastically. Woof woof. Woof woof woof. It was already late at night. The night between 8:30 p.m. and 12 o'clock p.m. on New Year's Eve was the quietest. Occasionally, the sound of fireworks would resound through the sky. However, after the sound of fireworks subsided, it would be a deep silence. Yunjian and the other two could even hear the barking of dogs. Sister, brother Ce, leave quickly. Xiao Zhu is scared. There's a dog. Xiao Yunju held Yunjian's hand with one hand and Ce's hand with the other. His short legs ran even faster, and his body leaned forward like a little hero charging forward. Xiao Zhu, don't be afraid. Big sister and your Gij Ce are here. Yunjian comforted her, but Xiao Yunju still pulled her along. He didn't hear any barking the last time he came out, but this time, he heard a series of barks. Ce strode forward with his slender legs. Every step he took was enough for Xiao Yunju to drag him and Yunjian along for quite a distance. He smirked and turned slightly to the left. From the corner of his eye, he could see Yunjian's clean and delicate face through the moonlight. Xiao Yunju ran very fast when he passed by the door of the group of brats. A glint flashed across Ce's eyes. In the end, Xiao Yunju dragged the two of them to the entrance of the store. There were many people standing at the entrance of the store. These people seemed to be here to buy fireworks. Yunjian was pulled along by Xiao Yunju and Ce as they walked over. Hee. It's you guys. At this moment, a childlike laughter suddenly rang out. Yunjian turned her head and saw a little boy about the same age as Xiao Yunju standing beside an adult looking at them. This adult seemed to be here to buy fireworks. There was a group of people behind this little boy. They were also a group of children, and they seemed to be his playmates. Wasn't this little boy the crew-cut brat who lit the firecrackers to bomb her and Xiao Yunju? Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Chapter 477. This boy with a crew-cut was called Wei Jin. He was one of the most mischievous children in the group. Yunjian and Xiao Yunju had just passed by his house. When he heard his friend's words, Wei Jin immediately picked up a small firecracker to attack Yunjian and Xiao Yunju. Especially when it was obvious that he was brainless. At this time, another child beside him egged him on, and Wei Jin immediately became angry. He had just been scolded by his mother because of the two people in front of him. This is our territory. You are not allowed to come over. Before Yunjian and Xiao Yunju could say anything, Wei Jin had already put his hands on his hips and called for his friends to hold hands and form a wall, not allowing Yunjian and the other two to pass. Children's thoughts were very naive. When the surrounding adults saw what Wei Jin and his group of children did, they simply ignored them. Idiot! When Xiao Yunju saw this, he withdrew his small hands from Yunjian and Ce's hands and pulled his eyelids down. He stuck his tongue out at Wei Jin and the others and made a funny face. What? He said we are idiots. You are the idiot, you are the idiot, you are the idiot. When Wei Jin heard this, his short and chubby body immediately walked over. Jin, come on, hit him. Chase them away. A group of boys stood behind Wei Jin and cheered. They were all typical brats. With this coaxing, Wei Jin became even more enthusiastic. When the adults weren't paying attention, he ran over and stretched out his hand to push Xiao Yunju. When children fought with children, it was usually you push me and I push you. Because the children were still young, most children didn't know any other complicated actions other than pushing each other around. However, when Wei Jin ran in front of Xiao Yunju and wanted to give him a hard push, Ce grabbed his wrist. You let go. This is between us men. Wei Jin used the attitude of an adult and looked up stubbornly at Ce. You want to bully him? Ce lowered her head and looked at Wei Jin, who was as fat as a rice ball. Her low voice was filled with dissatisfaction. Humph, he caused me to be scolded by my mother, so he wants to pay it back. Wei Jin gritted his teeth. Ha! Ce suddenly let go of Wei Jin's fat fingers. He snorted softly and didn't care about anything else when he let go. Wei Jin was a child after all. Since Ce had let go of his hand all of a sudden, he stumbled 2 steps backward and fell to the floor on his back. When he fell to the ground, his hands and buttocks didn't hurt, but Wei Jin sat on the ground and cried, Granny! Granny! Sob, sob, sob. Someone is bullying me. Wei Jin's crying attracted the attention of the adults who were still buying fireworks. Hearing that, an old lady in her 50s wearing flowery clothes ran out of the store while swaying her but in a very westernized manner. The old lady was still shouting, Oh, my little baby! What happened? What happened? After a while, the old lady rushed in front of Wei Jin and carefully pulled him up as if he was a treasure. My precious grandson, what's wrong? Who bullied you? Granny will help you kill them even if I have to risk my life. This old lady was Wei Jin's grandmother, Mu Lanhua. When Mu Lanhua saw her precious grandson fall, her heart almost fell out of her chest. Chapter 478. Wei Jin's cries of pain made Mu Lanhua's heart ache. Mu Lanhua hurriedly pulled her precious grandson up and checked him from head to toe. She mumbled, "Oh, my baby. Where does it hurt? Granny will blow on it and it won't hurt anymore." Mu Lanhua was extremely nervous. She looked Wei Jin up and down to make sure that he was fine. Then, she turned around and glared at Yun Jian and the rest. This was her family's only child. In this generation, she only had one grandson. Although she had granddaughters, none of them were as valuable as her grandson. Therefore, Mu Lanhua had always doted on and protected Wei Jin since he was young. She was afraid that he would get hurt. But now, her precious grandson was pushed by someone. Mu Lanhua was furious. She reached out her scrawny hands and pointed her wrinkled fingers at Ce. She shouted angrily, "Were you the one who pushed my grandson?" Wei Jin hid behind Mu Lanhua and stuck his tongue out at Xiao Yunju when he heard that his grandmother was standing up for him. He shook his head and made a funny face. Obviously, Wei Jin became even more arrogant when he saw that his grandmother was standing up for him. Although Xiao Yunju was still young, he could understand the meaning behind Wei Jin's actions. Xiao Yunju was instantly enraged. "You're so naughty!" Xiao Yunju glared back. However, Xiao Yunju had only taken 2 steps forward when Yun Jian pulled him in front of her. "I didn't push him." Ce didn't show any signs of fear. He only twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled mockingly. He really didn't push Wei Jin. He reached out to grab Wei Jin's wrist because Wei Jin wanted to push Xiao Yunju. He let go just now because he didn't care about Wei Jin. However, he didn't do anything. Wei Jin's body was covered in fat, and his short and chubby body automatically collapsed to the ground. So what if he pushed Wei Jin? How dare he bully Xiao Zhu in front of him? Ce had already shown mercy by not killing him. If Yun Jian's family was not here, her family would not allow it. He didn't want to waste any more time talking to Wei Jin. It would be easier to just kill him. Not to mention that the child was innocent. Since Ce could become the leader of an Hun, she was definitely not a benevolent person. Now, because of Yun Jian, he could even restrain himself. "You didn't push it? If you didn't push my baby, why would she fall to the ground? Young man, you look decent. How can you be so unreasonable?" "Ha! My grandson is still a child. You pushed him away and refused to admit it. Is there any justice in this world?" Mu Lanhua brought up a bunch of topics as soon as she spoke. As soon as Mu Lanhua spoke, The people around her immediately agreed. That's right, that's right. Don't tell me that the child would fall on his own. This young man is really... He pushed someone down, but he doesn't admit it. The one who spoke was a long-tongued woman from the village. She usually liked to gossip and jeer with others. In fact, she did not even see if it was Ce who pushed Wei Jin to the ground. Brother Ce. They're all bad. Xiao Yunju tugged at Ce's sleeve in fear. The little one hid in Yun Jian's arms. Ce's hawk-like gaze sharpened as the corner of his brow on his flawless face lifted slightly. He didn't speak. Mu Lanhua scolded for a long time. When she saw that Ce ignored her, she became angry. Then, she saw Yun Jian standing beside Ce. Seeing that Yun Jian was pretty, she felt that she was easy to talk to. Hence, Mu Lanhua decided to use Yun Jian as a target. Young lady, are you this young man's girlfriend? Ha, I'm telling you as an experienced person. People like him should stay away from him as soon as possible. He. Chapter 479. Ce shifted his gaze from Yun Jian to Mu Lanhua. There was a murderous glint in his eyes as his murderous aura flared. What did you just say? Say it again. He repeated her words. However, the tone that came out of his mouth was chilling. It was as if he would kill Mu Lanhua if she dared to say the same thing again. Mu Lanhua was also shocked by Ce's sudden change in demeanor. Her old bones trembled violently. The group of people who were watching the show were also frightened to the point that they quivered slightly. Say. Say what? You want me to say? I'll say it. Mu Lanhua was so frightened by Ce's demeanor that she stuttered. However, Mu Lanhua was an old woman. If she didn't suffer any real pain, she wouldn't be afraid at all. Ce sneered when he saw Mu Lanhua's frightened look. This old woman actually wanted her to leave him. This was something that Ce would never allow to happen. Once he set his mind on someone, even if she died, she would be his. No one could take her away from him. He reached out and placed his slender fingers beside his belt. There was a pistol hidden here. Since this old woman had crossed his bottom line, he would not hold back anymore. Although it was troublesome to kill a person, it was just a matter of words for the Enhun organization to destroy a person completely. And since when had he, Ce, ever restricted himself to anyone? Ce was just about to reach for his pistol when a pair of soft hands held him back. Glancing at her from the corner of her eyes, she saw Yun Jian's pretty face shaking from side to side. She meant to tell him not to kill. Seeing her gesture and the fact that her hand was still holding his, Ce's anger dissipated instantly and he let go of her. Yun Jian did not stop Ce because she could not bear to see him kill. She had killed so many people in her previous life that she could pave a bloody path. She and he were walking on the same path. However, in front of Xiao Yunju, Yun Jian did not want him to relive the terrible scene. More importantly, it was New Year's Eve. According to Qin Yiru's words, they should celebrate the new year peacefully so that everyone could be safe in the coming year. Mu Lanhua had no idea that she had just escaped with her life. She was now afraid of Ce. This was because the aura emitted by Ce frightened her. How shocking! Horrifying! Mu Lanhua fiercely glared at Ce, as well as Yun Jian and Xiao Yunju. She cursed as she dragged Wei Jin into the store. Mu Lanhua continued, Jin, let's go. Granny loves you. Granny will buy you a bunch of delicious food. Mu Lanhua was immensely pleased with herself when she said this. Wei Jin was a left-behind child. Mu Lanhua doted on Wei Jin and provided him with good food and drink since he was young. Wei Jin's parents worked outside and only came back during the new year. At the same time, Wei Jin's parents worked at construction sites and received a high salary. Therefore, whatever Wei Jin wanted, Mu Lanhua never lacked for him. It could be said that Mu Lanhua's family was considered very rich in a town in 1998. Therefore, Mu Lanhua spoke with a deep sense of pride. On the other hand, Ce came to Xinjiang town dressed very plainly. His clothes were from a street stall, but they were surprisingly compatible with Yun Jian. Therefore, Mu Lanhua thought that Ce was poor from the start, which was why she was so aggressive. Boss, give my grandson 5 packets of potato chips, 10 lollipops. Oh right, and 10 packets of haojia. Mu Lanhua shouted at the top of her lungs the moment she entered the store, as if she was afraid that people did not know that her family was rich. Okay. The shop owner nodded with a smile. At this time, Ce and Yunjian had already accompanied Xiao Yunju into the store. Mu Lanhua looked at Yunjian and the others with a look that said, "Can you afford it?" Chapter 480. 10 times. He wanted to buy everything in the store. When the group saw Ce tossing his bank card in front of the cashier counter and making such a bold declaration, they were all stupefied. The store had been open for a few years and had all kinds of things. However, it would take at least tens of thousands of yuan to buy everything in the store. Yet, Ce said that he wanted to buy everything at 10 times the price. That was hundreds of thousands. A few 100,000 yuan was enough to open a decent supermarket in this era. More importantly, how could he be so rich? From Ce's clothes, no one could tell that he was rich. However, perhaps it was because of his strong aura that he had a natural kingly aura. Therefore, everyone believed that he could really afford to spend so much money. Moreover, the card Ce threw out was real. This. The store owner, who was also the old man, was stunned. The store owner stood behind the cashier and was at a loss when he saw Ce throw out the bank card and what he said. As for Mu Lanhua and Wei Jin, they were standing there in a daze. Mu Lanhua's heart was racing. She suppressed her disbelief and looked at Ce as if she had seen a ghost. Could there really be so much money in the card? How could a person who could carry a bank card with hundreds of thousands of yuan on him be a simple person? But wasn't he wearing clothes from a street stall? Mu Lanhua couldn't understand. If Ce was so rich, why would he dress so shabbily? At this moment, Ce's magnetic voice was heard again. "Oh right. There's 5 million USD in this card. Take the card. The password is 88s. You can go to the bank to verify it before you sell the items in the store to me." Ce pretended to suddenly remember something. He stretched out his hand and brushed his hair with his slender fingers. Then, he spoke to the store owner leisurely. 5 million USD. Everyone almost fainted when they heard Ce's words. There was 5 million USD in the card. 5 million USD was equivalent to 30 million RMB. 30 million RMB. A millionaire was usually the kind of person who was worth millions. In 1998, there were very few people who could become millionaires. But what about Ce? He flung out his card and it was 30 million. What a frightening thing this was. You. Mu Lanhua was not stupid. She could tell that Ce had slapped her hard in front of everyone. However, when Ce said that he would buy the store at 10 times the original price, Mu Lanhua had already regretted treating him this way. Initially, she had spoken rudely to Ce because he was dressed plainly and looked like a poor kid. However, Ce's generosity made everyone believe that even if he was the son of one of the richest men in country Z, no one would doubt him. "I'm fine. This store is mine now. I don't intend to sell the items to you, so you can leave." Ce narrowed his eyes. He glanced at Mu Lanhua from the corner of his eyes. His handsome face revealed a trace of contempt. "Don't forget to take your grandson with you." He added a reminder. To be honest, this 5 million USD card was the card that Ce carried the least amount of cash on him. 5 million USD did not mean anything to him. After all, the assassins in Anhun would never accept a mission that was less than 5 million USD. Chapter 481. Mu Lanhua was a wealthy old lady. Her greatest pride was that she had a son who knew how to earn money. Therefore, Mu Lanhua was like a rich old lady, dressing herself up to the nines every day. At the same time, Mu Lanhua would also look down on those who were not rich. Of course, during this period, she didn't forget to make friends with those rich ladies. Mu Lanhua was not polite to Ce and Yunjian, but at this moment, she was speechless. "Granny! It hurts." Wei Jin was still a child. He did not even have the concept of large amounts of money. Seeing that Mu Lanhua did not stand up for him like she usually did, Wei Jin placed his hands on his buttocks and cried at Mu Lanhua. The meaning of this was very obvious. Usually, Mu Lanhua would pluck the stars from the sky for him when she heard his cries. But today, Mu Lanhua was still indifferent when she heard his cries. Wei Jin was anxious. He wanted Mu Lanhua to stand up for him so badly. Hence, he reached out his short hand and tugged at Mu Lanhua's clothes. Granny, Jean is in pain. He pushed me. He just pushed me. Mu Lanhua had brought Wei Jin into the store to buy food. Wei Jin had stopped making a fuss. But when he saw Xiao Yunju making a funny face and smiling at him, Wei Jin got angry again. Jean, be good. Granny will bring you home. Mu Lanhua was speechless. She reached out and pulled Wei Jin out. No. Jean wants Granny to help Jean. I want to buy Hao Jia. I want to buy potato chips and Wang Zai. Or Jean won't go back. I won't go home. Wei Jin was pulled to the door by Mu Lanhua and started to make a fuss. Mu Lanhua was furious. She had lost all her face because of her grandson. But this was her grandson. Mu Lanhua squatted down and looked at Wei Jin. She said softly, Jean, let's go home. Granny will cook for you when we get home. Ce had already bought the store and even ordered them to leave. Now, everyone outside was laughing at her. Mu Lanhua wanted to escape home as soon as possible. She did not want to expose herself in front of the crowd and be watched as if they were watching a show. However, Wei Jin was a child who had been spoiled since he was young. With Mu Lanhua's tug, Wei Jin became even more displeased. Wei Jin grabbed onto the doorframe and refused to let go. Wei Jin cried and shouted, No! Granny, I want to eat. Buy it for me. Jean, listen to me. Mu Lanhua bent down to pull Wei Jin. Wei Jin began to make threatening gestures. Crack. Wei Jin clawed at Mu Lanhua's face with her claws and fangs. Mu Lanhua could not help but scream in pain. In the next second, everyone saw a very deep fingernail mark on Mu Lanhua's cheek where Wei Jin's sharp nails had scratched. Fresh blood quickly flowed out from the fingernail imprint. There wasn't much blood. But after all, he had grabbed her cheeks. The face was the most important part of a woman. Even though Mu Lanhua was old, she still cherished her face. Mu Lanhua suddenly screamed in pain. She reached out and touched a pool of blood on her face caused by Wei Jin's scratch. Then, she pounced on Wei Jin like a madwoman. She muttered, Granny dotes on you so much, but you're still acting like a granny. Do you have a conscience? Mu Lanhua doted on her grandson, but she loved herself more. Chapter 482. Mu Lanhua pounced on him. She was really punching and kicking her grandson. Everyone in town knew that Mu Lanhua loved her grandson dearly. However, no one knew that she loved her grandson more. If she had to choose between her grandson and herself, Mu Lanhua would definitely choose herself. What was the point of doting on her grandson? Wasn't it because she was afraid that no one would take care of her when she grew old? From Mu Lanhua's perspective, her granddaughter was most likely a good-for-nothing. After a woman got married, she was like spilled water that could not be taken back. Hence, Mu Lanhua gave her heart to Wei Jin. Her motive was obvious. She wanted her grandson to take care of her when she grew old and needed someone to take care of her for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, Wei Jin had just done something that Mu Lanhua couldn't accept. He had scratched her face. Mu Lanhua was dressed to the nines. She was already in her 50s and 60s, but she could still do this. It was obvious that she cared a lot about her appearance. That deep claw mark had scratched Mu Lanhua and also exhausted her last bit of patience. That was why she attacked her grandson Wei Jin and lost control of her emotions. Her face. Such a deep claw mark. Even if it could recover in the future, it would probably leave a scar. The surrounding people were dumbfounded when they saw Mu Lanhua, who usually doted on her grandson, pounce on Wei Jin and pinch him while scolding him. Mu Lanhua was hitting Wei Jin as hard as she usually doted on him. Wei Jin was so scared that his whole body was shaking like a sieve. He looked at his grandmother in horror. For the first time, he felt that this shrewish grandmother in front of him was not like the grandmother he used to know. In the end, the surrounding people could not stand it anymore and pulled Mu Lanhua away. Wei Jin was so scared that he curled up and did not say another word. In the end, Wei Jin's mother heard about the incident and rushed to the store to take Wei Jin and Mu Lanhua away. The farce ended, but it was not hard to see that after today, the topic of Mu Lanhua doting on her grandson would change. The shop owner, who had been silent all this while, held Ce bank card in his hand. He finally had a chance to speak and ask Ce, "This card. Take the card. Go to the bank to verify it and get the money. Bring everything in the shop to this address. Ce reached out and used his slender fingers to pick up a broken black pen by the cashier's counter. Then, he took a piece of white paper from the table and quickly wrote down an address before handing it to the shop owner. The shop owner was stunned. He took the card and frowned at Ce. Young man, aren't you afraid that I'll take all the money in this card if you tell me the password? Of course I trust you. Ce smiled nonchalantly. The shop owner's heart warmed. He laughed loudly and accepted the card and address. Then he promised Ce, I, old Zhang, have been doing business for so many years and have never been greedy. Don't worry, I won't take a single cent of the extra money in the card. I'll send the item to you. Okay. Ce smiled. In the end, Xiao Yunzhu picked a few packets of Lay's potato chips for himself. He could not eat that much even if he played with them. Besides, Ce had bought the entire store. In the future, Xiao Yunzhu would have everything he wanted. After Xiao Yunzhu bought the snacks, the three of them quickly returned to Zhang Meihua's house. On the way back, they saw that Wei Jin's front door was tightly shut. Needless to say, there was already a huge commotion going on. Chapter 483. The moment Yun Jian smiled sweetly, Ce caught sight of it. He smiled silently and raised his eyebrows. Yun Jian and Ce brought Xiao Yunzhu back to Zhang Meihua's house. Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian had already started chatting happily. When Yun Jian opened the door and walked in, Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian didn't feel anything was wrong. The conversation between Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian was akin to complaining about her years of suffering to the other party. Finally, the heavy burden in her heart was released. All these years, whether it was Qin Yiru or Gu Junjian, they had hidden their hearts in the deepest part of their hearts and didn't let others find out. But just now, the two of them had a heart-wrenching conversation. Since they were outsiders, it didn't matter even if they revealed everything. So Qin Yiru and Gu Junjian chatted happily. At this moment, Yun Jian, Ce, and Xiao Yunzhu returned. You're back? Qin Yiru asked when she saw Yun Jian and the other two walk in. Yeah. Yun Jian nodded. At this moment, Xiao Yunzhu, who was standing between Yun Jian and Ce and holding their hands, was already a little drowsy. Xiao Yunzhu's eyes were almost closed into slits, but he still forced himself not to fall asleep. Xiao Yunzhu was still growing. Yun Jian let go of his hand and squatted down to look at him. She said to him, Xiao Yunzhu, you should sleep. Big sister will accompany you to sleep first, okay? At Xiao Yunzhu's age, most children would want to stay up until midnight and wait for the adults to give them red packets. Because it was very exciting to do this at that age. His eyelids were fighting, but Xiao Yunzhu still held them open and shook his head. Yun Jian couldn't help but caress Xiao Yunzhu's face as she said to him, Xiao Yunzhu, go to sleep. When you wake up, you'll be able to wear new clothes and receive the red packet from brother Ce. If you don't sleep now, you won't get any red packets. Yun Jian said in an enticing tone. However, Yun Jian's guidance was indeed effective. No, then Xiao Zhu will go to sleep. Xiao Yunzhu naughtily slipped away from Yun Jian and ran upstairs. Xiao Zhu, be careful. Qin Yiru saw Xiao Yunzhu jumping up the stairs, so she went up to protect him. When Qin Yiru was at home, Xiao Yunzhu usually slept with her. Yun Jian breathed a sigh of relief at once. She suddenly felt that children weren't so easy to coax. If you wanted to coax him, you had to coax him to the point of a gun. Otherwise, he wouldn't listen to you. When Gu Junjian saw that only he, Yun Jian, and Ce were left downstairs, he instantly blushed and ran upstairs. He said that he was going to find Qin Yiru to ask where she was going to sleep. In a moment, only Yun Jian and Ce were left downstairs. Yun Jian only just realized this. She rolled her eyes and pursed her lips. I'm going back to my room too. With that, Yun Jian walked up the stairs. Ce followed closely behind. The room that was prepared for Yun Jian was on the 3rd floor. It was only a wall away from Ce's room. Although there were many rooms in Zhang Meihua's house, it wasn't a villa. Every room here was connected by a wall. Yun Jian didn't plan to stay up late. At her age, it didn't make a difference whether she stayed up late or not. Standing in her room, Yun Jian looked at Ce, who was standing outside the door. She gestured to close the door and said to him, "Good night." With that, Yunjian moved the door to close it. However, before she could push it, the door was suddenly blocked. In the next second, a tall figure flashed in and closed the door behind him. Chapter 484. By the time Ce said that, he had already squeezed his way in and closed the door. Yunjian's face froze for a second before it was quickly covered by a flush of redness. "Get out!" Yunjian shoved Ce, anger flashing in her beautiful eyes. Ce was like a statue, unable to budge no matter how hard Yunjian pushed him. It was as if he was set on staying here. He was currently looking at Yunjian with a pair of eyes that were as sharp as swords, but when his gaze landed on Yunjian, his gaze softened. "Shoo!" Ce pressed his slender index finger to Yunjian's lips, his handsome face becoming clearer. At this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside the door, followed by a dong-dong-dong sound of knocking on the door. It was followed by Qin Yiru's call, "Xiao Jian, do you know where Ae went?" "He's not in his room?" "He was in her room." Yunjian closed her eyes and pressed her lips together, not daring to say it out loud. What a joke. If she said that Ce was in her room, what would her mother Qin Yiru think? "Mom, he might have gone out," Yunjian said from behind the door. "The kid should have gone back. I saw that his car in the yard was driven away." Gu Yunjian's deep male voice came from outside the door. Yunjian was speechless. She wanted to say that Ce was in her room, so how could his car be driven away? However, if she told Qin Yiru who was outside the room, "That child, he didn't even tell me he was leaving." Qin Yiru muttered to herself before shouting at Yunjian who was inside the room, "Xiao Jian, go to sleep first. I was planning to let Ae and Officer Gus sleep together tonight, but since he's gone, forget it." Qin Yiru went away as she spoke. Yunjian, however, was stunned. Ce and Gu Junjian were supposed to stay together for the night, but now that things had come to this, "Looks like I'll have to sleep here tonight." Ce shrugged, leaning against the wall with his slender body leaning against it. There was a hint of fake helplessness in his tone. "Unless you want your mom to know that I'm here." Ce smirked and stared straight at Yunjian. Yunjian understood right away. She gritted her teeth and glared at Ce. "When did you drive the car away?" "Adam's here too." Ce leaned against the wall and moved away from it, his long legs striding toward Yunjian with an arrogant gait. Adam was here too, but he was only here to drive the Lamborghini away for him. Yunjian felt like she had been tricked. She gritted her teeth and bit her lip at Ce. "Do whatever you want." She did not care anymore. With that, Yunjian ran to the bed, pulled the blanket and rolled over to close her eyes. However, Yunjian's action looked like she was acting coquettishly in Ce's eyes. He smirked. With her eyes closed, Yunjian could feel Ce's gaze sizing her up. The night was quiet. Suddenly, Ce's presence vanished completely. Yunjian opened her eyes and realized that Ce who was standing in front of her was gone. The windows of the house were opened, and a cold wind blew in. "He's gone?" Yunjian lowered her gaze, actually feeling a little reluctant to part with him. Before Yunjian could think further, the blanket covering her body was lifted from her back. A tall figure squeezed in. In spite of it, Yunjian froze the moment she felt the tall figure. Chapter 485. Yunjian suddenly reacted. At the same time, she flipped over and bent her legs slightly, wanting to kick him off the bed. However, just as she stretched her leg out from under the blanket, Ce easily pinned it down with his leg. "You!" Yunjian opened her mouth. She moved her lips slightly. "Sleep." Ce laid on his side and looked at her. He smirked, his handsome face filled with evil. After speaking, he pinned her leg down with one hand and turned on the bedside lamp with the other. The lamp was switched off, and the surroundings were pitch black. Before the lamp was switched off, Yunjian was still in that embarrassing position. However, at this moment, she stopped moving. Fortunately, the surroundings were pitch black. Apart from the faint scent of Ce, who was extremely close to her, she couldn't feel anything else. The words that came out of his mouth seemed to have magical powers. Yunjian immediately quieted down. Subconsciously moved, Yunjian nodded obediently in the dark. However, Just as Yun Jian nodded obediently, a strong force pulled her over. She felt Ce, who was beside her, suddenly pull her to him with a different hand. In the next second, Ce's scent thickened. He pulled her into his embrace. However, other than that, he didn't do anything else. After a while, Yun Jian, who was buried in Ce's chest, heard his muffled voice again. Sleep. Okay. Yun Jian was enticed and didn't resist. She suddenly felt that lying in Ce's chest was very warm. After that, Ce didn't move for a long time. He was waiting for her to fall asleep. However, Yun Jian was in a deep sleep. In both her previous and current lives, Yun Jian was always vigilant. In the past, when she slept, Yun Jian never dared to sleep deeply. Sleeping too deeply was a taboo for secret agents. This was what Lin Wei, an Hun's instructor who trained Yun Jian, had said. As a special agent, no one could guarantee that the people around them wouldn't stab them to death. There was also no guarantee that there would not be an assassination attempt in the middle of the night. Therefore, even the slightest movement could wake Yun Jian up. This had even become her habit. It had never changed. However, that night was the deepest sleep Yun Jian had ever had in both her previous and current lives. It seemed that other than when she was kidnapped by the organization in her previous life, it had been a long time since she had slept so recklessly. The next day, Ce didn't move at all and let Yun Jian snuggle up to her for the night. After he got up, he carefully protected Yun Jian as if she was a priceless treasure and slowly placed her upright. After confirming that he didn't wake her up, he opened the door and walked out of the room. After she left, she gently closed the door behind her. Huh! You didn't leave. Just as Ce walked out of Yun Jian's room, a surprised exclamation came from behind him. Ce turned around and saw Yun Yi's shocked face. Ce nodded. Did that mean that he slept in the same room as his sister last night? Yun Yi's lips twitched, feeling like the sister she had protected since she was young had been snatched away. However, it was Ce who had snatched her sister away, so it was fine. Qin Yiru, who had gone to the market to buy groceries early in the morning, was surprised to see Ce standing there. Hey, you didn't leave? Where did you go yesterday? She thought that Ce had already left in his car. Chapter 486. Qin Yiru nodded, not suspecting anything as she asked, Is Xiao Jian awake? No. Ce answered before Yun Yi could say anything. How do you know? Qin Yiru almost blurted out the question. Ce slept with Yun Yi. How could he be so sure that Xiao Jian was not awake? Moreover, Yun Jian never lazed in bed. In the past, Yun Jian would wake up early in the morning for a morning run. Now, it was almost noon and she was still in bed. Qin Yiru was not dumb. She found it odd as well. Cough, we knocked just now but no one answered. Xiao Jian should still be sleeping. Yun Yi quickly tried to smooth things over. Qin Yiru stopped asking once she heard Yun Yi's words. Qin Yiru would not think too much about it. She nodded and went to the kitchen with a bag of groceries she bought from the market. Before she left, she told Yun Yi and Ce, Xiao Jian, go see Xiao Jian if she's awake. If Xiao Jian wakes up, let her go to Fian's house. Fian came looking for Xiao Jian early in the morning but Xiao Jian wasn't awake yet, Qin Yiru said and left. The first day of the Lunar New Year was a day for relatives and friends to visit. It was just that Zhang Meihua was an elder while Qin Yiru was already divorced and staying at her parents' home. Therefore, many relatives would visit Zhang Meihua's home on the first day of the Lunar New Year. Usually, the elderly would be the ones to sit and wait. As for Qin Liqian and his family, they had already woken up early to visit their relatives and friends. Since Qin Yiru was divorced, she had cut ties with her ex-husband, Yun Gang's relatives as well. It was not good to be a freeloader at Zhang Meihua's house, so Qin Yiru woke up early to help Zhang Meihua. As Qin Yiru busied herself, even Gu Junjian, who had woken up early in the morning to train, helped her with a lot of work. 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Yun Jian's sleeping eyes finally opened. When she woke up, she felt dizzy for a while, but then she returned to normal. This time, she really slept like a log. She opened the door and went downstairs. Lunch was already prepared. Haha, Yun Jian, if you don't want to join the army, why are you lazing around in bed on the first day of the new year? Hee hee, come quickly, your mom has already prepared lunch. We can start eating after you. Gu Junjian said energetically. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. She saw Ce sitting next to her brother, Yun-yi, and walked over. In fact, before Yunjian woke up, many relatives had already come to visit her. At this time, a few relatives stayed behind to eat lunch with everyone. After Yunjian finished lunch, she heard that Lu Fian came to her house to look for her. She knew that she had slept too deeply last night. This was probably the first time he woke up so late. So, she packed up and ran to find Lu Fian. Of course, Ce had followed her all the way. When Yunjian arrived at Lu Fian's house, she saw the latter standing with a group of friends. Xiao Jian! Lu Fian called out excitedly the moment she saw Yunjian. Yunjian went over with a press of lips. The group standing beside Lu Fian noticed Yunjian as well. Yunjian! Haha! It's really you! Standing in front of Lu Fian was Li Xiangyi and others from Xinjiang Town's high school basketball team. When she had just been reborn, Li Xiangyi and the rest were considered Yunjian's first batch of friends. When they parted, they had promised to meet up in Longmen City after they got into high school together. When Yunjian came back to Xinjiang Town to visit Lu Fian, Li Xiangyi and the rest had come to look for Yunjian when they heard the news. However, they missed the opportunity. Chapter 487. You guys are here too? Yunjian raised her brow and asked the basketball team members whom she had not seen for a long time. Today was the first day of the Lunar New Year. Usually, students would follow their parents to visit their relatives and get free meals. Yunjian was surprised that Li Xiangyi and the rest did not go out to visit. Isn't that so? We're staying at home to see you. Yunjian, do you know how difficult it is for us to see you? You didn't even tell us when you came back the last time, causing us to make a trip to Lu Fian's house for nothing. Li Xiangyi was visibly agitated as he spoke passionately, looking at Yunjian. Even Ce, who stood out beside Yunjian, was mercilessly ignored. In spite of it, Ce did not show any dissatisfaction. He could see that Li Xiangyi and the rest of the basketball team only had admiration for Yunjian. Last time when we heard that you were back, we rushed to Lu Fian's house as fast as we could. In the end, we didn't expect that you would just leave. Wu Kuei was also quite happy. He stood beside Li Xiangyi and helped to speak up. It looked like the basketball team was thrilled to see Yunjian again. Xiao Jian, the incident last time has been resolved. My dad injured someone by accident and paid compensation with the female teacher. He's out of the police station now. Lu Fian went to Yunjian and told her about the incident last time when everyone was done talking. Her father would not go to jail as long as he was forgiven by the other party. Killing by accident and killing on purpose were different in the eyes of the law. Even if he had to go to jail, it would not be more than a few months. In spite of it, compensation was a given. The compensation to the victim's family was not small either. Now that the female teacher who bumped into Lu Fian's father was paying the compensation as well, the pressure on the Lu family was not as great as before. This was the best outcome that Lu Fian and her mother could imagine. Xiao Jian, my mom told me today that I have to invite you to my house for dinner no matter what. Lu Fian invited Jian Yiling after that. Mother Lu's gratitude naturally could not be described with words. Yunjian did not argue and immediately nodded. Okay. Since Mother Lu was grateful to her, she would naturally accept it. Lu Fian grinned. Xiao Jian, thank you so much for last time. Aya, who are we now? There's no need to thank me. Li Xiangyi smiled kindly, instantly alleviating the awkwardness. It was only then that Li Xiangyi noticed Ce, who was standing beside Yunjian. Li Xiangyi's thick eyebrows moved up and down. He walked over to Ce and asked Yunjian, Yo, who is this? Yunjian, are you enlightened? You even brought a man back? As Li Xiangyi spoke, he studied Ce from head to toe. Yeah, Xiao Jian, who's he? Lu Fian asked at the same time when she noticed Ce, who had been quiet all this while. Thus, the group quickly turned their attention to Ce. They would not have known if they did not look, but once they did, they held their breaths. Ce was handsome, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that his looks could make the world lose its color. Even Li Xiangyi and his friends who were also men could not help taking a closer look at Ce. Her man. Before Yun Jian could say anything, Ce summed it up with 3 words that were rather infuriating. Whose man? Yun Jian's man. Chapter 488. Just as Ce said that, Yun Jian gave him a little push. Yun Jian looked at the group with a smile, the sweetness on her lips unmistakable. Heh. With one glance, Lu Fian knew that Yun Jian and Ce were definitely up to something. Thus, Lu Fian moved closer to Yun Jian and asked with a grin, Xiao Jian, what happened to you when I wasn't around? Her Xiao Jian had found a man behind her back. Yun Jian glanced at Lu Fian from the corner of her eyes and blinked. After a moment, she smirked and flicked Lu Fian's forehead softly under everyone's expectant gaze. Take a guess. Lu Fian was dumbfounded before she pouted. Before Lu Fian could say anything, however, Li Xiangyi's voice rang. All right, let's take a stroll in town now, heh. Although they were going for a stroll, Li Xiangyi actually wanted to bring Yun Jian to Xinjiang Town's basketball court and ask her to teach more basketball skills to his team while Yun Jian was still around. It was not hard to tell that Li Xiangyi and his group were basketball fans. Yun Jian saw through Li Xiangyi's intention as well. She looked down, as if afraid that Lu Fian would continue asking her about what she said just now. She quickly answered, let's go. After saying that, she lifted her leg and walked forward. Ce caught up when she saw her moving forward, maintaining her position beside Yun Jian. Heh, they're up to something. Lu Fian snickered at Li Xiangyi and ran after Yun Jian. Li Xiangyi and the others scratched their heads, and in the end, they seemed to have figured it out. They followed the direction that Yun Jian and Ce went. Li Xiangyi even ran to the front to lead the way. In the end, Li Xiangyi led the group to the only outdoor gym in Xinjiang Town. The only outdoor gym in Xinjiang Town was set up near the town's government building. In addition, there was a special basketball court here, which was built for people who loved playing basketball and exercising. The investment fund here was provided by the government as well. Come, Yun Jian, I haven't seen you play basketball in a long time. Demonstrate for us. Li Xiangyi fished out a basketball from his bulging bag and passed it to Yun Jian. There were already many people running and shooting hoops on the basketball court. Girls' screams could be heard from time to time. There were no basketball hoops left for Li Xiangyi and the others to play basketball. There were only 4 hoops on the court, but from where they were from the side, the 4 hoops seemed to be occupied by members of a team. That was because there wasn't a basketball match going on over there. Instead, it was a group of gangsters with tattoos all over their bodies randomly shooting basketballs. Seeing this, Captain Wenrue greeted Yun Jian and the others and went over. He wanted to negotiate with that group of people to see if they could let him take out a basketball rack. On the other hand, Yun Jian and the others waited where they were. Xiao Jian? An incredulous male voice came from behind her. Yun Jian turned around beside Ce and her gaze sharpened when she saw who it was. The person standing in front of her was holding a basketball with one hand and had his jacket slung over his shoulder to show off in front of the girls. He was Yuan Ingjun, whom she had not seen for a long time. He was also the indirect culprit of the original owner's death. Yuan Ingjun was thrilled when he saw Yun Jian. Chapter 489. Before Yun Jian left Xinjiang Town, Yuan Ingjun and Lin Mingyu were the perfect couple in Xinjiang Town High School. They were the envy of many boys and girls in the school. Yuan Ingjun got together with Lin Mingyu only because her father was the principal of Xinjiang Town High School. Actually, the person Yuan Ingjun really liked was Yun Jian. His original plan was to date Lin Mingyu while he secretly maintained a relationship with Yun Jian. Yuan Ingjun also had a good plan. He wanted to use Lin Mingyu to make his life smooth, and when he graduated and had a stable career, he would dump Lin Mingyu. By then, he could officially be together with Yun Jian. However, Yuan Ingjun did not consider whether the original Yun Jian liked him or not. In Yuan Ingjun's mind, all girls would like his type. However, before Yuan Ingjun could do that, Yun Jian changed. She was no longer the same person as before. Even so, Yuan Ingjun only thought that Yun Jian was playing hard to get with him. He was Xinjiang Town High School's most handsome boy. He was the most outstanding boy in the school. How could Yun Jian not like him? Until Yun Jian ignored him again and again, which made Yuan Ingjun afraid. He even narcissistically thought that after he broke up with Lin Mingyu, Yunjian would forgive him. In the end, Yuan Ingjun failed to beg for forgiveness and had an idea. He originally planned to take Yunjian for himself. If a girl's most important chastity was taken away by him, wouldn't Yunjian be in the palm of his hand? However, before Yuan Ingjun could carry out his plan, Yunjian transferred schools completely. After that, Yuan Ingjun did ask people to look for her, but Yunjian seemed to have disappeared. Since Yuan Ingjun could not leave Xinjiang town, he could only give up. He continued to be Xinjiang Town High School's most handsome boy and enjoyed the adoration of girls. However, when he thought of Yunjian's stunning and exquisite appearance, which he had never gotten his hands on, Yuan Ingjun felt that the girls around him instantly lost their interest. Today, Yuan Ingjun and his friends had agreed to come to the basketball court to play basketball and show off in front of the girls. However, as soon as he arrived, he saw the person he had been thinking about day and night. Thus, Yuan Ingjun abandoned his friends and rushed towards Yunjian. Yunjian looked up at the voice and frowned subtly when she saw Yuan Ingjun looking at her with excitement. "Who are you?" Yunjian looked up at Yuan Ingjun and asked casually. It wasn't that she had forgotten about Yuan Ingjun, but that she didn't want to have anything to do with him. Xiao Jian? You don't recognize me?" Yuan Ingjun acted as if he was hurt. He stared at Yunjian with wide eyes, sizing up Yunjian without hesitation. "Who's Xiao? I'm sorry. Please call me Yunjian." Yunjian glared at Yuan Ingjun. The resolute attitude she displayed when she spoke could be understood even if the people around them were dumb. "Haha, Ingjun, looks like there are girls who don't like you too." A short boy standing beside Yuan Ingjun teased. Yuan Ingjun was someone who cared about his reputation. His temper flared when he heard what the boy said. Reaching out, Yuan Ingjun was going to grab Yunjian's hand. "Xiao Jian, stop fooling around. Where have you been these days?" "I've been thinking about." Before his hand could touch the corner of Yunjian's shirt, a pair of large palms strangled his wrist, grabbing his hand that was about to land on Yunjian's hand. Chapter 490. The people around them froze when they heard Siyi's domineering declaration. It was not because of anything else but Siyi's overwhelming aura. Some people were born with the aura of a king. There was no doubt that Siyi was such a person. He was born as the young master of an armaments family. Later on, his forces were even more powerful to a frightening extent. Siyi was already 20 years old when the Lunar New Year had just passed. He was still young at 20 years old, but his status was incomparable to others. In spite of it, the shock of the bystanders paled in comparison to Yuan Ingjun's fear. Yes, it was fear. Siyi's strong grip on Yuan Ingjun's wrist was so strong that it made Yuan Ingjun frown. Waves of pain came from his wrist, causing Yuan Ingjun to make a panicked expression. Yuan Ingjun swung his hand twice, shaking off Siyi's hand that was strangling his wrist. He sucked in a breath of pain and glared at Siyi, growling, "Who am I?" I'd like to ask you who you are." In fact, Siyi did not want to continue gripping Yuan Ingjun's wrist. It was because it was dirty. However, Yuan Ingjun thought that he had broken free from Siyi. He had not looked carefully just now. He only saw Yunjian and did not see Siyi, who was standing beside Yunjian in his excitement. Since when was there a man standing beside his Xiao Jian? Yuan Ingjun's gaze turned hostile at once. His gaze on Siyi was provocative, so Yuan Ingjun lifted his head lightly. He had his brothers here to help him. Moreover, his brothers were all experts in fighting. Siyi's deep gaze merely glared at Yuan Ingjun, ignoring the provocation in his gaze. He suddenly grabbed Yunjian's wrist and turned to leave. Aren't we playing basketball anymore?" Li Xiangyi asked dumbly from the side. "Are you dumb? Who's going to play your stupid basketball in this situation?" Lu Fian gestured at Li Xiangyi from beside him before she turned and ran toward Yunjian and Siyi. Before Yuan Ingjun and his brothers came over to stop Yunjian from leaving, however, a furious roar came from the basketball court. "Kid, I'm playing basketball here. Do you think I'll give you a basketball rack just because you asked? How embarrassing would that be?" Yunjian had been dragged 2 steps by Siyi. When she heard the roar, she tugged at Siyi, signaling him to stop. Yun Jian turned to look at the basketball court without looking at Yuan Jun and his men who looked sullen. On the basketball court, Wen Rui, who had just run over to negotiate with those fierce-looking gangsters with tattoos all over their bodies who had snatched away all the basketball hoops on the basketball court, was being roared at by a fierce-looking gangster with his finger pointed at the bridge of his nose. Wen Rui was the captain of Li Xiongyi's basketball team. When he saw that the 4 basketball games on the court were all occupied by this group of hooligans, he wanted to negotiate and see if he could give up a spot for them. Who knew that the gangster would immediately yell at him when he heard him? His voice was so loud that even the people standing at the edge of the basketball court could hear him. When the gangster yelled, the gangsters beside him all came over and glared at Wen Rui fiercely. Yuan Jun took one look and knew that Wen Rui was with Yun Jian. He was shocked, but in order to get a good impression from Yun Jian, he walked toward Yun Jian. He stood 1 meter in front of Yun Jian and glared at Ce fiercely. Then he turned to Yun Jian and said, Chapter 491. The hooligan who pointed at Wen Rui's nose and yelled was in his early 20s. Everyone called him Brother Ho, and the hooligans around him were cautious around him. The reason was simple. Brother Ho's father was an elder of Falcon Hall. That was an elder of Falcon Hall. Falcon Hall was now the 2nd largest gang in Zhe province. Not long ago, Falcon Hall had destroyed the 2nd largest gang in Zhe province, Flying Passage, and replaced it. Such a powerful gang was rare even in the country. That was why Falcon Hall's reputation had spread far and wide. Even a person like Yuan Jun would be scared out of his wits and retreat 3 feet back. Moreover, Brother Ho was the son of an elder of Falcon Hall. His status was extraordinary. Yuan Jun came to tell Yun Jian this because he wanted Yun Jian to have a better impression of him. He had already taken such a risk to tell her about this. Moreover, if Yuan Jun had not come to tell Yun Jian to get Wen Rui back quickly and not go against Brother Ho, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Instantly, Yuan Jun felt that Ce, who was 7 to 8 centimeters taller than him and was several times more handsome than Yun Jian, looked like a gigolo. How could he be compared to him? Yuan Jun had risked Brother Ho to hear such important news and told Yun Jian about it. Brother Ho was a vengeful person. If Brother Ho heard Yuan Jun talking behind his back, Yuan Jun would not have an easy time. Falcon Hall was a gang that Yuan Jun and the others could only look at but would never dare to come into contact with in their lifetime. Therefore, for Yuan Jun and the others, if they encountered a character like Ho Gu, they would never dare to go against him. Falcon Hall. Yun Jian turned to look at Yuan Jun when she heard the name, but her hand was still held by Ce. Yuan Jun saw that Yun Jian had turned to look at him. He nodded like a chick pecking at rice and continued, "It's that Falcon Hall. The one who annihilated Flying Passage, the 2nd largest gang in Zhe province not long ago. He's very powerful. We can't afford to offend him." As Yuan Jun spoke, he looked at Ce provocatively. What Yuan Jun wanted to express was very simple. He only thought that Ce was a gigolo. Wasn't he just a little more handsome, a little fairer, and a little taller than her 1.77 meters? Heh, could he be more knowledgeable than himself? These matters of the black market were not something that ordinary people could easily find out from any channel. Even Yuan Jun had to make friends with all sorts of people and use all sorts of channels to find out this information. Oh! Yun Jian curled her lips. Her beautiful eyes moved, and she lowered her face. Yun Jian's appearance stunned Yuan Jun. The girl lowered her head, her hair tied in a high ponytail at the back of her head. Her slightly pursed lips and alluring beauty made everyone present feel suffocated. However, before everyone could take a good look at the girl's figure, a slender hand reached out and pulled the girl's petite body into an embrace. Yun Jian was pulled into Ce's embrace without a word. His woman was not someone that others could spy on just because they wanted to. Even if it was her every move, he was not allowed to. Chapter 492. Where Ho Gu pointed, he even skipped Yuan Jun and the others. Yuan Jun and the others were shocked. Oh no! Ho Gu must have thought that they were in cahoots with Wen Rui. Then wouldn't they be done for? Yuan Jun, you've gotten us into trouble. The short boy standing next to Yuan Jun yelled at him in fear. His tone was full of resentment. Don't blame me. Yuan Ingjun said hastily in shock. Just as he spoke, however, he regretted it. Didn't he just say what was in his heart? Was he not blaming Yunjian's people for provoking Hogu and getting dragged into this because he was talking to Yunjian just now? She did not care about anything else, but if Yunjian misunderstood and blamed her, would she not have a chance anymore? Xiao Jian, Yuan Ingjun wanted to explain. Shut up. Before he could finish, he was intimidated by Yunjian's growl. Yunjian's sharp gaze swept toward Yuan Ingjun. The latter was startled by Yunjian's glare. He could not help recalling the scene of Yunjian strangling a cobra to death with a single hand and her frighteningly nimble movements. Yuan Ingjun shuddered. By then, Hogu and his men had already captured Wenrui and surrounded Yunjian and the others. At the same time, Hogu strutted over. Hogu and his men were tattooed on all the exposed parts of their bodies, and each of them looked majestic. They jogged over and surrounded Yunjian and the others. It was like a gang fight in the movies. Yuan Ingjun was dumbfounded. He swallowed the saliva of both of them. If someone were to look carefully, they would probably be able to see that Yuan Ingjun's pair of relatively long and thin legs were shivering in a subtle posture. His legs were like springs, trembling here and there. Hee hee. I heard that you guys want to snatch the basketball hoop from me? Hogu, who was wearing a black tattered shirt and trousers, was a person who dressed differently in this era. At this time, Hogu was swaggering towards Yunjian and the others. Wenrui was already under control. No. Brother Ho, we're not trying to steal your basketball hoop. We're not on the same side as them. The short boy on Yuan Ingjun's side explained to Hogu in fear. Shut up. Hogu narrowed his eyes and looked at Yunjian, then at Lu Fian. After a while, he turned to the short boy beside Yuan Ingjun and growled. The short boy was so scared that his whole body trembled. He really shut his mouth. Two beauties. Do you want to play basketball? After Hogu saw Yunjian and Lu Fian clearly, his eyes gradually turned from hostility to lust. Why were Ho Ji's group playing basketball on the field? Their goal was similar to Yuan Ingjun's group. They didn't really want to play basketball, they just wanted to act cool in front of the girls. Yunjian and Lu Fian didn't even look at Hogu. Hogu clicked his tongue and became even more excited. He said bluntly, Hey, two little girls, how about this? If you two accompany me tonight, I'll be merciful and let you guys go. These harsh words made Yunjian and Ce frown at the same time. However, before Ce and Yunjian could make a move, Yuan Ingjun's voice was heard again. Just, as long as they accompany you tonight, Brother Ho, will you let us go? Yuan Ingjun's weak voice was heard. Yuan Ingjun was very afraid of Hogu. He heard that not long ago, someone offended Hogu and had his finger chopped off. He was afraid that he would be implicated. Chapter 493. Yuan Ingjun made it sound like he and Yunjian were a couple and Ce was just an insignificant person. What did he mean by asking his woman to accompany this Hogu? Ce frowned, his sharp gaze fixed on Yuan Ingjun's face. Before Yunjian could reply to Yuan Ingjun and before Ce could make a move, Lu Fian spoke to Yuan Ingjun on behalf of Yunjian angrily. Bah! Shameless, you scumbag. Don't compare my Xiao Jian to you. You don't deserve it. Lu Fian had always been on Yunjian's side. Lu Fian's words made Yuan Ingjun very dissatisfied. He looked at Lu Fian with disgust and even retorted, Who do you think you are? I'm asking Xiao Jian to accompany him, not you. You. As he spoke, Hogu was already looking at Yunjian with a gaze that said he was sure he could get it. His gaze roamed over Yunjian blatantly, making one's hair stand on end just by looking at his heated gaze. Before Hogu could finish persuading Yunjian with Yuan Ingjun, Ce's voice rang harshly again. Don't let me hear you slander her again and you'll die. Yuan Ingjun and Hogu shuddered when they heard the voice and slowly turned their gazes to Ce. The moment they saw Ce clearly, they were both stunned. Then, the emotions of shock, fear, terror, and horror overwhelmed him. A pistol had appeared in Ce's hand out of nowhere. The silver pistol looked classy and classy. Ce's slender hand gripped the gun, his finger curling slightly as it hooked onto the trigger. The muzzle of the gun was pointed at Yuan Ingjun's head. Gun. 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 Ce had a real gun. When Yuan Ingjun and his men realized what was going on, They were scared out of their wits at the same time. Ce looked like he was in his 20s, but he had a gun. It was something that even regular triads could not get their hands on. Coupled with what Ce had said just now, Yuan Ingjun and his men were all stunned. Yuan Ingjun and his men were certain that if they dared utter another word of contempt toward Yunjian, the gun in Ce's hand would shoot Yuan Ingjun's head without hesitation. Yuan Ingjun's jaw dropped, but he could not utter a single word. At this moment, even Hogu was so scared that he stopped breathing. The reason why Hogu was so powerful in this generation was because his father was an elder of Falcon Hall. But even if his father was an elder of Falcon Hall, he did not have a gun. Compared to these men, Lu Fian, Li Xiangyi, and the others were terrified as well. They did not expect Ce to have a gun. This was smuggling firearms. Before Ce could do anything, a plop was heard. Everyone was stunned again as Yuan Ingjun, who was full of confidence earlier, suddenly knelt down in front of Ce. Don't kill me. I was wrong. I'll give Yunjian back to you. She's yours. I don't want her anymore. No, don't kill me. Yuan Ingjun looked at the gun in Ce's hand in horror as he knelt down and begged Ce for mercy. In Yuan Ingjun's mind, beauties were important. However, how could they be more important than his own life? Moreover, he only wanted to play with Yunjian. He planned to throw her away once he got tired of her. Chapter 494. I'll say this again, there's nothing between you and me. There's no such thing as returning the favor. If you spout nonsense again in the future, this will be your end. Before Yuan Ingjun could finish, Yunjian snatched the gun from Ce's hand. Ce allowed her to snatch the gun from his hand. After Yunjian finished speaking, she pulled the trigger with her index finger and shot Yuan Ingjun, who was kneeling on the ground. Tiske. Because it was a silencer, there was no need to worry about the loud noise that would attract attention. Oh! Yuan Ingjun, a grown man, was so frightened by Yunjian's sudden attack that he shrieked in pain. He never thought that Yunjian would snatch Ce's gun and shoot at him. Hogu and the others who were standing at the side shivered violently. She actually dared to shoot. At that moment, the bullet fired from the silencer grazed past Yuan Ingjun's head with a distance of 0.1 centimeters. Gotcha! The sound of metal being pierced was heard. Everyone turned around to look. Next to the concrete floor of the basketball court, there was a small hole in the pile of ordinary steel fences that had been shot by the bullet just now. The hole that had been shot through was still filled with a wisp of smoke from the gunpowder. Everyone couldn't help but gulp at this scene. If the bullet hadn't brushed past Yuan Ingjun's head, but had instead pierced right through his head. Everyone's hearts couldn't help but tremble at the thought of this. Ah! Yuan Ingjun shrieked. The school hunk aura that he put on in the past completely disintegrated at this moment. Even the people who came with Yuan Ingjun were shocked by Yuan Ingjun's cowardice. Yunjian never thought of shooting Yuan Ingjun to death. It was the first day of the new year and she didn't want to become a well-known figure so soon. However, Yunjian didn't return Ce's gun to him. She turned her head slightly to look at Ce and saw that he was looking at her with a gentle gaze. His gaze seemed to say that no matter what she did, he would stand behind her and support her unconditionally. Yunjian pursed her lips and suddenly felt that she had nothing else to worry about. Suddenly, Yunjian turned her sharp eyes to Hogu. Her sharp eyes were also sizing up Hogu. Hogu trembled under his stare. Why are you looking at me like that? If Hogu looked at Yunjian as if she was a beauty at the beginning, then at this time, it was completely different. She even fired a gun just like that. This woman was too terrifying. Your father is an elder of Falcon Hall? What's his name? Yunjian tilted her head and looked at Hogu in a perverse manner. This question made Brother Ho shudder. What do you want? Hogu was a little hesitant and didn't say it out loud. Nothing. Yunjian twirled the gun in her hand. It seems like you want to have a taste of my gun too? Yunjian threatened as she held the gun in her hand. This scene made Brother Ho's heart skip a beat. Hogu immediately shouted, Duanlei, my father is Duanlei. It's him? Hearing this name, Yunjian narrowed her eyes and asked. Hogu was actually Duanlei's son? And Duanlei was also Su Zetian's subordinate. He even had some dealings with Yunjian. Who would have thought that Duan Lei, an honest man, would have such an unkind child? You know my father? Hogu panicked when Yun Jian acted as if she knew his father. He had done so many bad things. If his father found out, he would definitely kill him. Then who are you? Hogu mustered up his courage and asked. Chapter 495. Yun Jian. Hogu murmured. His instincts told him that she was not simple. How could a woman who could shoot people with a gun be simple? Hogu was in Xinjiang town today because his hometown was in the countryside of Xinjiang town. It was Chinese New Year now, so his father had brought him back to his hometown. Since this woman named Yun Jian dared to ask his father who she was, she must have some tricks up her sleeves. Hogu had already retracted his gaze towards Yun Jian, who dared to shoot at him. Let's go. Hogu waved his hand, gesturing for his brothers to follow him. Ho Ji's brothers listened to Ho Ji's order, and immediately turned to leave. Did I say that you can leave? Hogu and the others had just turned when Si Yi's magnetic voice came from behind them. Yun Jian had kept quiet after finding out that Hogu was Duan Lei's son. Based on Ho Ji's personality, he would definitely not be able to resist asking Duan Lei who she was. Hogu would probably still be in trouble when Duan Lei found out what had happened. However, before Yun Jian could speak, Si Yi spoke. You dare to slander my woman, and you still want to leave? Si Yi's hoarse but slightly threatening male voice made Hogu and the others, who had already turned to leave, tremble again. Si Yi's existence was even more mysterious compared to Yun Jian, who had shot at him directly. After all, that gun had been taken from Si Yi's hands. It was true that Si Yi had aimed the gun at Yuan Jun initially. However, the fact that he could take out a gun proved one point. Even Ho Ji's father, Duan Lei, who was in Falcon Hall's underworld and was now an elder, did not have the right to carry a gun at all times. However, Si Yi had a gun. This proved one point. He was definitely more powerful than his father. Hogu had made it to this point, so he still had this bit of insight. He trembled as he looked at Si Yi. In the end, he swallowed hard and changed his previous arrogance. He lowered his head to look at Si Yi and asked, Do you have any other orders? The son of an elder in Falcon Hall actually lowered his head to Yun Jian and Si Yi. Aura. This was the power of a person's aura. Yuan Jun had already recovered from his shock. However, he was still unable to calm down. Let him go. Yun Jian reached out to touch Si Yi's hand as she spoke to Si Yi. Yun Jian's words to Si Yi were the most effective. No one could stop Si Yi from doing what he wanted to do. If Adam and Mo were here, they would have been shocked. Because Si Yi's father's Yun Jian and Yun Jian's as a group. When had the leader of the Anhun organization ever been so overcautious when killing people? When did they not kill directly? Okay, Si Yi looked at Yun Jian with his gentle eyes and nodded. Whatever you say. Yun Jian curled her lips and gave Si Yi a mesmerizing smile. Her red lips moved up and down like a delicious dessert, seductive. When Hogu and the others heard that Yun Jian was willing to let them go, they all ran away in an instant. Yuan Jun, on the other hand, was paralyzed on the ground, trembling all over. He couldn't accept this. But Si Yi suddenly reached out with his slender fingers and cupped Yun Jian's small face. Following the allure of her red lips, he leaned in and kissed her. When Yun Jian came back to her senses, she felt Si Yi's face magnify. In the end, he pecked Yun Jian's red lips in front of Yuan Jun. Chapter 496. Yuan Jun watched as Si Yi kissed the soft lips that he had thought about countless times but never had the chance to do so in front of him. He was instantly devastated. However, no matter how devastated Yuan Jun was, he did not dare to move at all. Si Yi was too mysterious and Yun Jian was too scary. Yun Jian's bullet had brushed past his head. At that time, Yuan Jun felt that he was only one step away from death. Just one step and he would be dead. Dead. Yuan Jun was also a normal person. Of course, he was afraid of death. Moreover, he was still young and in his prime. How could he die like this? Therefore, Yuan Jun was trembling on the ground and did not dare to move at all. He was afraid that if he moved, Yun Jian would raise her gun and shoot at him again. Therefore, he watched as Ce held Yunjian's delicate face and tossed and turned in bed. He was furious but did not dare to say anything. However, Yuan Yingjuan's cowardice was seen by his group of friends. Yuan Yingjun was actually a famous person in Xinjiang Town High School. After all, he was the school hunk of Xinjiang Town High School. Among Yuan Yingjuan's group of friends, there were a few who were not very kind. They usually had opinions about Yuan Yingjun. After all, no one wanted to see someone better than them. For example, the short boy from before. Yuan Yingjun was considered an outstanding person in Xinjiang Town High School. Of course, Yuan Yingjun could not be compared to Ce. Even so, Yuan Yingjun was still considered handsome and was highly sought after by the girls. Therefore, the short boy actually hated Yuan Yingjun from the bottom of his heart. He was jealous, but he did not say it out loud. It wasn't hard to imagine how Yuan Yingjuan's friends, who had long disliked him, would slander him when he returned to school in the future if they saw his cowardly appearance. Of course, for now, Yuan Yingjun had already lost all his face. On the other end, Ho-gu brought a group of people back home as if they were escaping. Ho-ji's real name was Duan Ho, Duan Lei's eldest son. Other than that, Duan Lei also had a younger daughter. Duan Lei's family used to live in the city center of Longmen City, but the two elders were unwilling to leave Xinjiang Town to live with him in Longmen City. Therefore, during the new year, Duan Lei brought his wife and children back to Xinjiang Town. Seeing his son, Duan Ho, running back with a group of people, Duan Lei, who was sitting in his own courtyard, stood up. He, big brother is flying. Brother is flying back. Duan Ho's 3-year-old little sister had braids on her head. She waved her hands and smiled happily when she saw Duan Ho and company running over. Children were innocent and naive. Duan Lei, who was sitting on a short wooden stool outside the courtyard, had already stood up. Seeing that his son Duan Ho had returned, his face darkened as he scolded loudly. Ho, where have you been fooling around? Although Duan Lei was usually simple and honest, he was not inferior when it came to teaching children a lesson. It was a pity that Duan Ho had grown up with his mother, and his mother could not control him. Hence, Duan Ho had been very willful since he was young. Dad. Duan Ho ran back with his group of brothers without looking back, as if they were running away from something terrifying. How old are you yet you're still so rash? Where are your manners? Duan Lei could not help scowling. Duan Ho had already brought the group of people to Duan Lei. Duan Ho could not help asking Duan Lei, Dad, there's a woman just now. She's so scary. She seems to know you too. I heard her say that she's called. Yeah, Yunjian. Chapter 497. Dad, you really know that woman? This time, it was Duan Ho's turn to be surprised. Even Duan Ho's buddies were flabbergasted. Who was Duan Lei? It could be said that Duan Ho and his buddies dared to stir up trouble in Xinjiang Town because they were using Duan Lei's name. Poor Duan Lei had no idea that his son had been using his name to oppress others for so long. Duan Lei had always thought that his son, Duan Ho, was just a little mischievous. Otherwise, even the usually simple and honest Duan Lei would have the heart to beat his own son, Duan Ho. Despite Duan Lei's honesty, he was no slouch when it came to teaching his son a lesson. What do you mean by that woman? Ho, shut up. Duan Lei bellowed once he heard how Duan Ho addressed Yun Jian. It had been a long time since Duan Ho heard his father reprimand him in such a tone. He shrunk his neck, not daring to make another sound. Duan Lei was an elder of Falcon Hall after all, a founding member of Dragon Head Gang. Naturally, he was full of boldness when he shouted, Brat, what did you do? Duan Lei continued to bellow at his son. Duan Ho was so frightened by Duan Lei that he recounted everything that had happened in full detail. Duan Lei's face darkened as he listened. Then Duan Lei yanked his son's ear and bellowed, You brat, you almost got me into trouble. Where's Sister Jian? Come with me and ask for forgiveness. Listening to what Duan Ho said, Duan Lei understood right away that Yun Jian did not have the time to kill his son back then because she was giving him face. Ouch. Dad, is that woman really that good? Duan Ho was not a woman, so he was not as delicate as a woman. He howled as Duan Lei yanked him by the ear, but he was dragged to the basketball court. Duan Lei did not mention Yun Jian's identity, which baffled Duan Ho and his buddies even more. Since Duan Lei had made his move, no one dared to escape, so they followed him back the way they came. On the basketball court, Ce held Yun Jian's little face and tossed and turned in bed. In the end, he reluctantly pulled away from her mouth. There was still a long way to go. In the future, no one would even dream of touching his woman. Just like that, Ce kissed Yun Jian in front of Yuan Yingjun. Yun Jian's face was flushed red. She was so shy that she really looked like an ordinary girl in her 3rd year of middle school. Yuan Yingjun, who was watching from the side, almost vomited blood. Ce did it on purpose. He purposely kissed Yun Jian in front of Yuan Yingjun. Moreover, the more intimate they got, the more Yuan Yingjun felt like his spirit was about to collapse. However, without Ce and Yun Jian's orders, Yuan Yingjun didn't even dare to leave. There was also Yuan Yingjun and his group of brothers. Other than Yuan Yingjun and the others who were frightened, Lu Fian, Li Xiangyi, and the others who were standing at the side quickly recovered from the shock. Of course, they were also shocked by Ce's daring move. Damn you! Move faster! Duan Lei's bellow came from the basketball court. Duan Lei's house was not far from the basketball court, only a few streets away. Duan Lei was still pulling Duan Ho's ear as he hurried back with a group of people. Duan Lei pulled Duan Ho's ear and arrived at the basketball court in no time. Yuan Yingjun could not help gasping at the sight. Judging by his age, the only person who could pull Duan Ho's ear like this was probably Falcon Hall's elder, Duan Lei. Duan Lei dragged Duan Ho to Yun Jian and greeted Yun Jian respectfully, Sister Jian. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.